But in the interest of time, I would suggest that we start, and I am sure we will be joined by many more as we start today's deliberations. We have had registrations for some 300 participants. So we do think that we will have an extremely good critical mass for our discussions. So let me start by wishing all of you honored guests, guest speakers, keynote speakers, panel participants, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome you to the South-South Cooperation Forum on Food Security and Agrobiodiversity in times of COVID-19 and climate change. This event is the first of its kind organized under the auspices of UNEP, and we are organizing it together with our partners, the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and UN Women. Over the next 3 days, this forum will deliberate on the challenges and opportunities for immediate joint actions that enhances South-South cooperation. And this will be with an emphasis on food security and agrobiodiversity in the face of COVID-19 and climate change. It is also expected that this forum contributes to the wider discussion on South-South cooperation within the Sustainable Development Goal 2 on zero hunger and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework at the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15 in Kunming in 2021, as well as the Global Food Summit. Unfortunately and regrettably, UNEP's Deputy Director Joyce Msuya is not able to join us for the opening today, but she has asked me to convey on her behalf the following key points for our discussions over the course of the coming days. The pandemic threatens to trigger the worst global food emergency in more than half a century, as the virus and the world's response to the outbreak disrupts the global food supply chain. Harvests have slowed, food markets and factories have closed, produce is being left to rot as the supply chain breaks down. The price of food is rising, and yet incomes are plummeting as economic catastrophe looms. As a result, the number of people facing starvation may have doubled by the end of 2020, and we are seeing millions of people forced into poverty. The global food system was already in crisis before the pandemic. The system was already failing 800 million people who go to bed hungry every night. 2 billion suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, and over 2 billion people are overweight or obese. Population growth and an increase in wealth in developing countries will place an even greater stress on the food system. The third point is that our food systems are also failing our planet. They are destroying the natural world, and with it our shot at leaving behind a livable planet for our children. The food systems are driving multiple crises: mass extinction of species, soil loss, land degradation, drinking water pollution, air pollution, water depletion, greenhouse gas emissions, antimicrobial resistance, and the spread of zoonotic diseases. We know that 60% of global terrestrial biodiversity loss is linked to food production. We know that 33% of soils are moderately to highly degraded due to erosion, nutrient depletion, acidification, salinization, compaction, and chemical pollution. We know that 61% of commercial fish populations are fully fished, and 29% are fished at a biologically unsustainable level and therefore overfished. Food systems contribute up to nearly a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, fueling one of the biggest existential threats humankind has ever faced. To make matters worse, as we destroy the natural world and as global heating intensifies, our food systems will come under increasing stress from multiple crises that will strike at the same time. We are already seeing the devastation that this brings. Last year, extreme drought destroyed farmlands and pastures in East Africa. Food prices spiked by up to 300%. Months later, the strongest ever Indian Ocean dipole brought the wettest rains in 40 years to the region. The warm, wet weather then brought the worst locust plagues in 70 years in Kenya, and for 25 years in Ethiopia and Somalia, threatening crops at harvest time. The pandemic struck, creating a perfect storm that threatens to increase food insecurity for millions of some of the most vulnerable people on Earth. The pandemic has underlined what we already knew, that we urgently need to make our food systems more resilient to shocks that we are now going to intensify due to climate change. Let us use the crisis as a turning point to rebalance and transform our food systems, making them more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. Shorter food chains will create more markets for farmers and improve access to both inputs, such as seeds and fertilizers, and outputs, food products. We must reduce post-harvest food losses at every stage of the value chain by improving access to low-cost handling and storage technologies and packaging. This will reduce food waste, curtailing the expansion of agriculture and the destruction of the natural world. Water and energy-saving irrigation, conservation agriculture, livestock grazing management, energy-efficient cold storage, biogas production, and renewable energy are all ways we can protect the food system from global heating, one of the biggest threats we face. Let me conclude by noting that the pandemic has already disrupted and destroyed so much: lives, jobs, food chains, businesses. We must seize this moment to enhance South-South cooperation and its opportunities to build back better. To prevent economic collapse, countries are mobilizing stimulus packages that amount to about 10% of global GDP. We must ensure that the money is not wasted. It should be invested in resilience rather than on subsidizing agricultural practices that destroy the natural world and undermine our shot at a healthy future. We must also recognize that the people who directly or indirectly manage our food systems are the largest group of natural resource managers in the world. They are critical agents of change who, if empowered, could transform the currently unsustainable patterns of consumption and production that are unraveling life on Earth. We urgently need to reinforce legislation to prevent pollution and other forms of environmental degradation. We urgently need to repurpose agricultural support away from disincentives and financial flows, away from unhealthy, unsustainable, unequitable practices. And we urgently need to translate the case for transformation into compelling economic terms and ensure that natural capital is factored into policymaking. This is an opportunity for humanity to assess the greatest challenges of our time and to build back better towards a more holistic and sustainable future where agriculture is no longer part of the problem, but part of the solution to achieving food security, combating global warming and inequity, and ensuring sustainable development. Thank you. Today at this forum, we will consider the key role that food and nutrition security play in poverty alleviation. And we are deeply honored to have Johan Swinnen, Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute, give the keynote presentation to kick off our discussions. Let me provide you with a brief introduction to Professor Swinnen's outstanding career. Prior to joining IFPRI, Dr. Swinnen was a professor of economics and director of the Center for Institutions and Economic Performance at the Leuven University and senior research fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels. Dr. Swinnen was a lead economist at the World Bank from 2003 to 2004 and economic advisor to the European Commission from 1998 to 2001. Over the course of his career, Dr. Swinnen has been a visiting professor at various universities, including at Stanford University's Center on Food Security and the Environment, and a frequent advisor to institutions such as the World Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Dr. Swinnen earned his PhD from Cornell University and holds honorary doctorates from the University of Göttingen and the Slovak University of Agriculture in Nitra. He is a fellow of the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association and the European Association of Agricultural Economists, and he served as president of the International Association of Agricultural Economists from 2012 to 2015. Dr. Swinnen has published extensively on agricultural and food policies, international development, political economy, institutional reforms, trade and global value chains, and his body of work has been widely cited. With this, I turn over to you, Dr. Swinnen. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Stendahl. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you so much for inviting me. Congratulations, I would say, to UNEP and to the partners who are organizing this very important conference. And I think it's a very timely conference as well. And IFPRI is most honored to be invited to contribute to the very important issue of South-South cooperation in food and nutrition security. In my presentation, I will first start with kind of a general overview of the food and nutrition security situation, and then I will move to, I will discuss the implications of COVID-19 for this situation. I will try to share my screen here and put the presentation. Are you seeing my screen now?
It works well, Dr. Swinnen.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start with, so what I'm going to say is very much drawn from two different publications from IFPRI, and of course updated versions. So one is our Global Food Policy Report of 2020, which focused on building inclusive food systems, and a topic I think which is even more relevant now at the end of 2020 than it was when it came out in the middle of 2020. And our recent publication on how COVID-19 has affected global food security. Both are freely available from our website, ifpri.org. And so there's a number of blogs there, which are also available for download, which continue to be updated, provide updated information and analysis on the situation. As was already said by Dr. Stendahl in our opening comments, we know that food systems are pressuring planetary boundaries in various ways. The global food system is consuming more than 30% of the global energy in the world, and it basically contributes more than 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The extent to, and so this is for the food system as a whole, and the components of the food system differ in terms of their contributions. if you look at farming, the fisheries, livestock production, cropping production, then you see it's a relatively small part of the global energy use, and so much of the energy use is kind of downstream from the farms. But if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions, they are the farming part or the fishery part of the emissions are much more substantive in terms of share of the food system as a whole. We also know that foods, as already mentioned in the introduction, food systems also contribute to increased water use, water stress and scarcity, and this of course is affecting production in large parts of the world. This was true even before climate change, and obviously climate change is reinforcing these pressures globally. And of course, and also these things, as we know by now, although it is affecting, is reinforcing the pressures globally, it is doing so more in the most vulnerable parts of the world, the poorest parts of the world. We also know now from research that has focused on these things more quite recently, that healthy diets are out of reach for many people in the world. Studies have shown now that more than 3 billion people, so that's a huge amount of people, a large number of people, more than 3 billion people worldwide cannot afford a healthy diet, as, for example, the Eat Lancet diet has identified a healthy diet to be. It's expensive, it's too expensive for many people, particularly in Africa and in South Asia, where these are concentrated. Yet, despite these constraints on the global system, on the planetary boundaries, and the fact that many people cannot afford healthy diets, what is particularly worrisome is that the positive trend of declining hunger, declining malnutrition, which had gone on for almost 2 decades, has come to a halt and has actually reversed in recent years. These are data from the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and you see that around 2014, 2015, there is a clear turning point. So the positive trend, both in terms of less people being malnourished, less people having hunger, and the share of the population in the world being hungry and being malnourished has stopped and is actually reversed. And so this was already going on in the period from 2014 till 2019, as you see. So the dotted lines at the end are predictions from the United Nations. And these predictions were before COVID-19 struck. Okay, and so COVID-19 obviously is making these things worse, more difficult. Let's take a look at which factors have contributed to that. Now, of course, as I'm sure you know, there's a number of factors, but a few stand out. One of them is actually it's the basic things in the world, it's income. And so if you look at the right panel here, so these are data about GDP growth per capita. So this is income per capita, annual percent growth. The green line is the evolution of low and middle income countries, and you see the economic and financial crisis in 2009, which really had a big downward impact on that. But overall, the low and middle income countries were around somewhere between 2 and 6% evolving. And so the level in the last decade, from 2010 to 2019, was clearly lower than in the 2003 to 2008 period, but was the decline in income is particularly bad in sub-Saharan Africa and also for example, in Latin America. And here you see that Africa was having positive income growth numbers for most of the 2 decades before 2015. Since then, there is negative growth there, and this has really had an important impact on the food and nutrition security situation in sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the developing world. Another factor is conflict. We know that conflict contributes to acute hunger. It has always done so, but what we see is that there's a major change from 2014, 2015 to recent years. So these on the right-hand panel, you see the forcibly displaced people worldwide, and the average number it varied a bit, but it was around 40 million people from 1990 till 2015. And so what we see here is that this number has gone up dramatically over the last 5 to 6 years, from 40 million to 80 million people. So that's a major increase. It's a doubling of people who are forcibly displaced. And so where are they? So what we see is that they're part of them have been are internally displaced, meaning they have migrated within the country. They had to fled their where they lived, and so part of those have been leaving the country. So that's the refugees. And so on the bottom panel on the graph, you show the top 10 refugee origin country. The top graph has the internally displaced people, but a lot of these areas where this is happening is in again in Africa and in the Middle Eastern countries and some of the Far East countries. Again, so you see that of the almost 80 million forcibly displaced people, 80% of those are in countries affected by acute food security, insecurity, and malnutrition. Then, of course, to some extent, these things are related, although sometimes it's hard to identify the causality of this thing. But here is a graph showing the global, the average global temperature anomaly, meaning how much temperature is higher these days than it was supposed to be, or it was on average before climate change. And you see also here, it's really in recent years that these average anomaly has gone up significantly. And so this is contributing also to undernourishment, to malnourishment. And so, of course, the relation with conflict is obvious, I think, also in this case. Then there is also some, but already Ms. Stendahl identified in her introduction, the double burden of malnutrition. And so on the right-hand panel, you see the relationship, or basically the relationship of underweight, so malnutrition, that part of the malnutrition equation, with income classes in countries in Africa, and both in urban households and in rural households. And you clearly see that the poorest countries, the poorest households are more identified, more correlated with underweight, as you would imagine. So there's no surprise there. What's interesting, if you look at the right-hand columns there, you see that overweight is a very strong issue now, also in the poorest countries in Africa. And there you see that the correlation is different. It is in the highest income households that overweight is a larger problem. And so this double burden of malnutrition is not only affecting the middle income classes, but it's also very much affecting the poorest countries in the world, the poorest households in the world. And so on the next slide, what we see here is the relationship between within country obesity prevalence and income changes over time as economies develop. So the left-hand panels have from Benin and Ghana. These are two African countries, low-income countries. And there you see that obesity is concentrated in the higher income households. When we go to middle income countries like the Dominican Republic and Turkey, there you see there is no difference between poor households and rich households within the country in terms of the obesity prevalence. But if you go to the richer countries like Spain and Germany, for example, there you see that the relationship is inverse. Their obesity prevalence is concentrated in the lower income households in the country, the relatively lower income. So this is a trend that we see globally. And so this reversal, if you want, of obesity prevalence and the correlation with income groups within a country changes as a country develops. Now let's take a look at COVID-19. COVID-19 has affected global poverty and nutrition. We know that. Here are estimates from IFPRI, and we estimate that roughly almost 150 million people are or have been falling back in extreme poverty because of COVID-19. So this adds to the graph to where I showed you initially to the already growing problems of hunger and malnutrition before COVID started. Many of these are concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa and a big share also in South Asia, again, the poorest parts of the world, not surprisingly. There's also significant impact on nutrition in the sense that with falling incomes and also to some extent with the disruption of supply chains, what we see a shift from healthy foods, such as fruits and vegetables, some of the animal products, to less healthy foods, mostly basic caloric staple products, and those have increased, while the more healthy fruits, which are also more expensive, there we see a significant decline in global nutrition. To some extent, these factors have been reinforced by disruptions in supply chains, which have been more important in perishable products, perishable supply chains. And so, for example, fresh fruits and vegetables have been significantly affected as well, more so than grains, which are more storable. These are, so what I showed in the previous slide are basically estimates and predictions based on global models. Here are some results from our work where we have looked at country models. And what we see here is that the impact of the lockdown measures that countries have taken are very severe. These are averages per month of lockdown. And so we see that the declines in country GDPs are between 25% and almost 40% for these. These are examples from Africa and Southeast Asia, so India, Ghana, and Nigeria, and the results are very similar across these countries. Okay, increases in poverty headcount, these percentage points are very high. They go from 11% to almost 17% both, and so there's not that much difference between rural and urban regions of the country. So very significant effects there as well. So COVID-19 is reinforcing inequality in the world. And why is it? If we look at the food and nutrition security, it is basically for a number of reasons. One is that poor people in the world spend the largest share of income on food, much more than rich people. We all know that. And that, of course, means that income falls is particularly affecting their food and nutrition security. Poor people also, they do not have Zoom to have conferences. They often don't have a computer or a mobile phone. They don't have land. They don't have capital to invest. So what they have to get an income from is their physical labor. And it's physical labor which is affected directly by COVID-19, the disease, and of course also by the measures that countries have been taking to restrict the disease, which is basically restrict physical labor going out and start working and interacting, etc. So poor people again here are disproportionately affected. COVID-19 also causes more disruption in food value chains that are labor intensive, and they are concentrated again in poor countries, and much more so than in rich countries where food value chains are more capital intensive, more knowledge intensive as well, with a lot of artificial intelligence, etc. It's not just the private value chains that are disrupted, but also several of the public social programs and nutrition programs have been disrupted, and these are typically more important for poor people, and poor people in general have less access to health services, and the most vulnerable among the poor people are children, women, and the people who had to migrate to go work for an income. And so typically remittances have fallen very strongly in a number of countries as people were no longer allowed to migrate for their work. Here are some of the recent survey results. These are data from Ethiopia, but other data that are now coming in from other countries really confirm this. And so we see that on the left-hand side, we see that these survey results confirm that the income declines and the percent of the household which have been affected by this are particularly strong among the poorest groups in society, more so than among the middle and richest income groups. And on the right-hand panel, you see that the same thing holds for the nutrition effects. This is the share of households that are consuming dairy products, which is important in these regions for healthy nutrition. And there you see that the richest income groups have been affected very mildly, and it's the poorest and the middle income groups, which were already consuming considerably less, which have been affected most strongly. We know also that women are especially vulnerable to these developments, and this is true for a number of reasons. We have, if you are interested in this thing, you should definitely look at some of the blogs on our website on this, written by specialists on gender issues, and nutrition, and so they point at a number of reasons why this is the case. We know that health measures are affecting women and men differently. income shocks also typically affect men and women differently, and affect women worse than men when they are affecting households. These are direct effect, indirect effect, but which are very important for the long run, is that they are affecting women's empowerment and children's schooling, and particularly the schooling of female children. And these are affecting, of course, people's capacity to participate in the labor market in the long run, and can have very important impacts on long run poverty and long run empowerment. And so the recommendation is here that when governments or international institutions are introducing policies in a variety of ways to basically address COVID-19 problems, that they should be adapted to deal with these gender implications, and basically or targeted specifically to women delivery mechanisms which allow to counter these gender effects. Here's some again some of our analyses which basically confirm these different gender effects. So this is a simulation based on data that we have collected in Myanmar, and there we see that if we compare the income effects because of the decline in international remittances and or international and domestic remittances, which is really important in a country such as Myanmar, there we see that the impacts on rural households almost double as strong, twice as strong as in urban households, but are particularly strong for female-headed rural households, where the effects are more than three times as strong as in urban households. So very much confirming the gender effects. Another element that comes out of these analyses, if we look within food systems, within agri-food systems, then we see that it's particularly food services which are very strongly affected, more so than agro-processing and more so than agriculture. Now, let me just make sure I'm not being misunderstood here. I mean, the impact on agriculture and farming is still very strong. It's minus 14, 15% in these countries, but it's just that the effect on the food and the service sector is so much stronger that it looks small here, but minus 15% is really a big effect on people's income, farmers' income. What's important also when we look at these food services, a lot of these food services are concentrated in urban areas, and there's a lot of poor people who don't have a lot of capital or a lot of land who are working in these food services. So it's really, from a poverty perspective, this is a really important, negatively important factor that is affecting welfare in these countries. If we look at the restructuring of the global supply chains, there's a lot of discussion on this thing. So how COVID-19 has affecting the supply chains and the food systems. And here I think it's very important to take a nuanced perspective. There's a lot of heterogeneity in food systems and supply chains around the world, whether they are global or local, whether they are labor intensive or capital intensive, large scale, small scale, whether they are short supply chains or long supply chains, whether staples or perishables, etc. And so what we've seen is that the impact varies across these supply chains. But what we also see is that there's a lot of innovations going on right now in the supply chain. So I think that's a very positive, very welcome development. One of the observations that we have is that some of these innovations are basically in terms of new technology, but other innovations are really social innovations, reorganizing of supply chains in a variety of ways. For example, setting up new transport systems so that people can go to work in these supply chains in different ways, etc. In terms of the technology innovation, we see a rapid growth of digital technology, not just in rich countries, not just in middle-income countries, but also in poor countries. E-commerce is growing, ICT innovations are growing. And so this, again, we see that these types of technology developments, which we had expected to take place maybe the next decade, are being introduced now at a pace that nobody had predicted a year ago. And so I think that's an encouraging development. Of course, there also we have to worry about, okay, what are the equity effects of this thing? Is everybody benefiting from these innovations in digital technology, etc.? Here is, this is from a very recent evidence that we have collected and that we have the data that we've analyzed. This is again from our work in Myanmar. And so there the survey asked to households, which are the most important parts of COVID-19 that have affected you. And so identify the three largest effects. And so what's interesting there is that we see that the income effects in terms of household income declines and job losses, so employment effects, are much more important than the disruptions of the food supply chains. We think now, and so the information that is coming in, the data that we're collecting now, is that initially in the first weeks, maybe months, that the disruptions of food supply chains were really important in a lot of countries, but that gradually these food supply chains have reorganized themselves, both through public support measures, through private support measures, and through people and households and companies at different level of the supply chains, reinventing themselves, if you want, or reorganizing themselves. That the supply of food is now less an issue than actually the income effects and the employment effects, which are hurting poor people disproportionately much. What is also a very welcome development, I think, is that how social protection programs have evolved. And so here you see, this is the growth on the right-hand panel. You see the growth in terms of both the number of measures and the number of countries which have used social protection measures. And this have grown tremendously over the course of basically since the outbreak of COVID-19. And the encouraging part of this is not just that this basically benefiting the people who need it, but at the same time that this may have long-lasting effect, that once these social protection measures are introduced, they may persist after the COVID-19 pandemic. On the left-hand panel, you see the nature of these social protection measures, social protection policies, and you see that food aid and cash transfer make up almost half of them. And so this is the way some of these social protection measures have been implemented. Another important set of policies have been trade restrictions, and these are less positive. There we see that both at the international level and the domestic level, there's been numerous trade restrictions being introduced. So the left-hand panel shows how many African countries have closed their borders in just in a 2-week period in March, when the COVID-19 was spreading in Africa. And so this, of course, the border measures were introduced mostly for health reasons, but had very important impact on the intra-Africa trade in food, particularly in food, and that was going on and affecting clearly the food and nutrition security situation. At the same time, globally, several trade restrictions have been introduced, particularly by food exporting countries. Here again, there is also some promising development there, and quite a few of these measures have been changed by now, and trade is actually proceeding now at a level much beyond that was the case in March and April, when these trade restrictions have been introduced. And so many of the trade restrictions have been liberalized again by now. This is, I'm almost to the end here. I just wanted to point out some important new research that came out of this. Is work we have done jointly with a number of organizations, including FAO in this case. And so this is under the CIRRUS 2030 project. And so what this research shows is that it is possible to end hunger sustainably by 2030 if we are willing to invest significant in this area. And so the analysis shows that if we roughly double overseas development aid from its current level, from around $12 billion to around $26 billion, which is $14 billion more than we do now. So it's a little bit more than doubling. Plus, in addition, significant investments in the countries itself, that would allow to sustainably end hunger by 2030. I can answer, I don't have time to go into detail on the different types of measures there. They're all explained very well in this new report that just came out a month ago. Finally, let me end by saying that what is really important here is that we are in a transformative moment in history. There is much creativity and innovation going on in the supply chain and in the value chains and the food systems. And I think we should now see this We have to move from thinking of this as a crisis management problem to an opportunity to create more resilient, more sustainable, and more inclusive food systems. And I think there is an important role to play both for the public sector and for the private sector. So we see a lot of innovations taking place in the private sector, both by large companies, but also by a lot of small companies, by producer organizations, by consumer organizations. And on the public sector, this may also be the opportunity, the moment in time that policy innovations, reforms that were not possible a year ago, may be possible now, just because of the situation, the political economy situation that COVID-19 is creating and has created. With that, this is again the slides which I showed you, where you can find more information on that. And with that, I would like to end my presentation and thank you again for inviting me. And I congratulate again UNEP and the partners for this very important and very timely conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swinnen. I know I speak for all of us when I would like to congratulate you for such, brilliant setting of the scene. And also would like to thank you for, even for being, your expose of where we're at was very sobering. And we do recognize the challenges, but at the same time, that optimistic note that you finished on, I think hopefully sets the scene for our discussions now over the next 3 days, really looking at creative solutions and seizing the opportunities that this crisis now may allow us. With this, I would like to move on to 2 sessions of panel discussions. And again, we are very honored to have 2 outstanding experts in this field, guide and facilitate our discussions in the panels. And these are Dr. Lingshu Zhang and Dr. Gholam Rasool. In the interest of time, if I may, I would like to introduce your 2 facilitators at once now, recognizing that they will be facilitating each respective sessions of the panels. Dr. Lingshu Zhang will be facilitating session 1. And she is a UNEP senior staff and director for the UNEP International Ecosystem Management Partnership, which is a joint center between the Chinese Academy of Sciences and UNEP. The center has been recognized by UNEP as the first collaborating center in the South and for the South, mobilizing science for policy on ecosystem management, focusing on the nexus of climate change, ecosystem services, and sustainable livelihoods. She is a fellow of the World Academy of Sciences and is also affiliated with the Institute of Geographic Sciences and Natural Resources Research of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences as a professor. She is also a member of the Expert Advisory Committee of the State Council Leading Group Office of Poverty Alleviation and Development of China. An economist by training, Dr. Zhang has rich professional experience in policy-relevant studies on poverty alleviation, sustainable rural development, labor market development, public investments, child health and nutrition. She has conducted many empirical researches in these areas and is one of the initiators of impact evaluation research using randomized controlled trials in rural China. Dr. Gholam Rasool will be leading our second panel session, and he is a chief economist at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD. Prior to his appointment as a chief economist, he served as a theme leader for livelihoods and head of the Economic Analysis Division and Policy Development Specialist at ICIMOD for about 10 years. Prior to joining ICIMOD, he worked 15 years in the Bangladesh civil service in different ministries, where he was involved in the formulation and implementation of national policies, plans, and programs. Along with development work, he has been actively involved in research in areas that include agriculture, rural development, natural resource management, food security, poverty alleviation, regional cooperation, food, water, energy nexus, and sustainable development in South and Southeast Asia region. He has contributed to over 150 papers in refereed journals, books, policy briefs, position papers, and technical reports. His research findings are incorporated in many national and global policy papers. He was a coordinating lead author of IPCC's special report on ocean and cryosphere. Dr. Rasool holds a PhD in regional and rural development planning from the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand. With this, I would like to turn over to Yuling Xu and Dr. Rasool for leading what I know will be truly interesting and insightful discussions within the panels. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Kerstin. And I wanted to echo what you said. You's presentation is really setting the stage for what we're going to do discuss and contribute in next 3 days. And as you introduced, I'm going to chair the first session. What I wanted to suggest, since all the bios were posted on the web platform, I'm going to just consolidate the timing by just highlighting our panelists, the key functions there, and then go at once, and then we move on with presentations. I hope that is okay. We have 4 panelists for this session. Our first speaker is Dr. Jiban Krishna and Vishwa, and he's currently the executive director of Krishi, if I pronounce it right, Govishna Foundation, and he has his PhD in crop science from the Philippines, and he was the Director General of Bangladesh Rice Research Institute between 2013-16, and he is experienced in working in rice research and development for more than 33 years. And he's also recognized by Bangladesh Academy of Agriculture as golden medal and for the outstanding leadership in rice research. And our second speaker is James Bata, and who is a technical advisor with UNEP, UNEP and UNEP Poverty Environment Action Program based in Malawi. And James actually possesses a wealth of knowledge on the developmental issues of food security and poverty alleviation, employment generation, gender disparity in agriculture, environment and natural resources, and also sustainable development, which characterize the economics of most African countries. And our third panelist is Ms. Sabana Shwakati, if I pronounce it correctly, from Nepal. And she is a joint secretary under the Ministry of Agriculture Development and has been associated with the government of Nepal for the last 20 years under various capacities. And she, of course, among many functions she had headed the National Plant Quarantine Program as a program chief, and currently she's heading Post-Harvest Management Directorate under the Department of Agriculture as a program director, among many things. And our last, but never the least, we have Ms. Elena Amanda Kwako. And she's a UN Women, she's a Women Economic Empowerment Program specialist at the UN Women in Burundi. And her work objective is to support women and girls and boys migrate internally displaced persons and refugees to benefit from climate resilient agriculture, develop agricultural value chains and entrepreneurship for their economic empowerment, and promote the role of women, girls, for gender-sensitive nutrition. And she also has been working for more than 15 years in the field of development and humanitarian. So with this, I wanted to start with our true session and with our first speaker, Mr. Johan. And now the floor is yours. I would want to suggest, because everyone has allocated 10 minutes, I wish that you could, get the key points and allow some time for discussions and action. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me share. Oh, yeah, Hasanat. And to share হচ্ছে না কেন?
হ্যাঁ স্যার ইতে যান জমে যান
জমি কোথায়?
এই তো জম নিচ্ছে স্যার
হ্যাঁ বেরিয়ে গেছেন।
জম তো এই কানেকশন ছিল না,
ছিল তো।
শেয়ার স্ক্রিনে আপলোড করতে হবে। You have to upload in the share screen.
না সেটা করব, কিন্তু ওই কোথায় সমস্যা হলো?
আমি কাহা
এটাতে বড় করে ক্যান্সেল। এইখানে দেন তো, এখানে হ্যাঁ হচ্ছে না কেন? শেয়ার এখানে ইয়ে করুন, এই জায়গায়
এটা না কোনটা এই প্রেজেন্টেশন এটা না?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ yes. It's okay now. আবার ইয়েতে শোনা যাচ্ছে না। এখানে কোথায়?
এই দেন স্যার, এখানে এইটা দেন, এইটা
ইয়ে কই?
এটা মিনিমাইজ করে দেন, মাইনাস না।
Yes, you can start now that we can see, but a little bit more moving the screen a bit.
So it's okay now, I think, yeah?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, it's
So,
okay.
I'm sorry that there is a little bit disturbance here. Anyway, let me start. I'm sorry that I have been suffering from COVID-19 a few weeks ago. So I am still in the progress of recovering. So still I'm weak, so I could not afford sufficiently to prepare this presentation. More so, I am not an economist or social scientist. I'm a crop scientist, so it is a little bit difficult for me to accommodate in this flow with the social science perspectives. Anyway, so the first word is citation from the Upanishad. It says that unknown Brahmoti Bejanat. It's a Sanskrit word. It means the food is God. So can you imagine with this citation that how important food is? No food means no life. So everything started from food. Food means agriculture. Agriculture means we have to do a little harm, at least to do some harm to the nature. That means we have to disrupt our biodiversity. That means I do not know. That is the cause of the global warming, scientists say. So we have started from the zero. Maybe we will go again to the zero. That means creation and destruction is going side by side. This is the questions you have asked. I do not know how much I could satisfy you. So this is about the sustainable global development goals. I'm going hurry because I could not make the pictorial presentations. Just the descriptive one is here. We have to satisfy the SDG. That means we have to, the second one of the SDG is the end of hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So, but due to in our country and also in South Asia and global perspective, you know, that is global warming, the climate change, and also this time what we are having now, our present problem is COVID-19 epidemic is also, we are of course in a big stress. First, maybe already our Director General from IPRI, he has described a lot of things about food and nutrition security. And you know, like the African countries, we have the same problem, food shortage, and of course, nutritional deficiency also in South Asia, all the countries, and Bangladesh, we are nothing different from all those countries. And we have the chronic food deficiency before, but nowadays for few years, we don't have food short, and maybe especially the rice, we don't, our staple food, we are not having a shortage of rice, but still, that is, we have sufficiency of rice, but still we have a shortage of other commodities also, agricultural commodities also. That's why we have still the problem to attain the sustainable food security. Okay, I am going here. I will not take too much time. This is, you know, the consequences of climate change and COVID-19 on food security. What I am asked for to answer. You see, this is, you know, this man who was born in 2,500 years ago is Kautilya. Probably you know his name, or in Chanakya. He has a prediction what would happen several thousand years later. The earth will be destroyed, the Ganges will be dry out, the God will leave the earth. So it means his prediction says that this creation will not survive. And he was one of the famous development economists of the ancient ages. So that's why we have to be, he just asked us to be serious, to be cautious, so that we must not do much harm to our mother earth. Consequences of climate change and COVID-19 and food security. Being the most vulnerable to climate change and diverse socioeconomic and climate conditions, Bangladesh can be treated as the representative of the South Asian, of course, but we have a very deeply, thickly populated country, though among the South Asian countries, but with the problem is almost same. In recent years, while Bangladesh have progressing by tackling and struggling with the effect of global warming and climate change, COVID-19 pandemic emerged as a disaster for the nation. Yeah. Among the three dimensions of food, nutrition, security, that is availability, access, and stability, Bangladesh has made tremendous improvement ensuring the food availability. Already I have mentioned, yeah, recent days. It has been developing the situation of food access, fighting with the poverty. Yeah, we have now, maybe we have enough food to feed our people. The problem is our maybe even the extreme poor, sometimes they don't have access to that's the problem nowadays. Yeah. And with rigorous government initiative for agricultural development, Bangladesh has just achieved self-sufficiency, but not yet the sustainable food security. This situation, it's very difficult for Bangladesh economy to face the twin crises. That means climate change and widespread COVID-19 pandemic. The country is tackling poverty with development of agriculture sector and utilization of huge labor force into garments. You know, the garments is one of our support to our economy. But this time, due to COVID-19 pandemic, this industrial sector of economy is in a big challenge nowadays. The global economic crisis due to COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown and movement restriction have severely hampered our economy, achievement of Bangladesh. I'm talking about Bangladesh now, by directly curbing the wage earning opportunity of the economically employed labor forces. And according to Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, countries about 80% of 60.8 million economically active labor forces are informal workers. A significant number of them are garments workers or workers of different export-oriented industries, and many of them already losing their jobs in the industry. They have gone back to the rural areas, and they are seeking for the alternative way of existence. In Bangladesh, until August 2020, export order, that means in garment sector, worth of $3.18 billion has been cancelled. It's a big thrust for our economy, which affected the employment of 2.28 million garments workers. Income opportunity of the informal workers in non-farm sectors as well as casual labor, especially in farm sectors, are mostly affected by COVID-19 induced contraction of employment and restricted movement measures. And according to a Center for Policy Dialogue from Bangladesh study, poverty level in Bangladesh, which was 24.3%, is likely to go up to 35% due to the long-term effect of the pandemic crisis. Countries like Bangladesh are affected by multiple crises resulting from more frequent extreme weather events, that is floods, droughts, etc. And pests are going to suffer most if proper and effective action is not taken. Alongside, it is obvious that government is not in a position to support huge population for a longer period of time. That we have the huge number of population. And right now we have the at least 1 million people from our neighboring countries, Myanmar. We have to bear those peoples. Prolonged pandemic situation is hampering local food productions due to shortage of input. Yeah, but those are the things. But still, our government is quite active and they are trying to solve these problems. And government is always in favor how our farmers could get benefit and how to get recover from those pandemic thrust. And last time in Boro season when we have really a problem, it was very difficult to get our crops harvested. That is a winter rice. And we are very successful because our government took the right time initiatives so that our farmers could get the crops. So still, we don't have the food crisis too much to some extent. The problem is others, maybe value chain. There are a lot of disruptions there. Those things are controlled by, in fact, our middle businessmen. And that's why the farmers, though they have enough food, but they are not getting sufficient price in the farm gate. Okay. Then, yeah, severe labor shortage in the harvesting. Already I have mentioned, we have recovered that one. Though the current food insecurity is by and large not driven by food shortage, I have already mentioned, because we have not much food shortage right now, especially cereal, but other crops we have. Supply disruption and inflation affecting key agricultural inputs such as fertilizer, seed, and prolonged labor shortage, which affects the next crop. But in fact, though I have mentioned here, but I think government is trying. And the input supply, the government has a special emphasis, and I think it will not be so much problem, especially in our cases. The farmers are experiencing acute hunger. They may also prioritize consuming, sometimes if they are hungry, they could consume their seeds. But I think government is also taking care of that. Situation will be worsening for the people, those who were already chronically food insecure before COVID-19. Yeah, there are some people, they didn't have enough food before COVID-19. Their sufferings will be more right now because of the movement and short of having enough job. Loss of incomes and remittance.
Speed it up a bit. Yeah.
How
Could
many
you
minutes?
speed it up? No, you've already over the minute.
Okay, okay.
I suggest you to wrap up.
Okay, so maybe okay. I am going to finish this one. So because I know this is the percentage of population under national poverty line. This is up to 2016. Poverty line was decreasing, but nowadays, I'm sure the poverty line is increasing. Okay, this is the consumption of rice pattern, and this is all the poverty and food security and critical issues. I'm not going to coping mechanism. I am not discussing that one, but. You see, the government has taken the coping mechanism of Bangladesh, the short term, mid term, or long term. I'm discussing that one, but government has already taken the initiatives how to cope the crisis we are having now due to COVID-19. And then I am going to in the multilateral partnership. Yeah, We have partnership with different, because of research case, we have partnership with different organizations like URI, like IFRI, like CEMIT, and our scientists are trying to develop varieties with getting help from those, and maybe in agriculture field, we have developed a lot of crop varieties. Those are tolerant to different stress conditions, and they are contributing our economy. Yeah. So maybe with I have already maybe with this, because I am little hurry and I am not so prepared. I am still in the progress of, because I was suffering from COVID-19. I myself is the survivor of the COVID-19. So I'm sorry I could not satisfy you. Anyway, with this I want to conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And you said you're a tech person, but you very, very comprehensively laid out the picture in your country. And I wish you a very speedy recovery. So we appreciate very much your efforts made. Thank you very much. I think it's a lot of information, but echoing what the keynote speaker had been laying out. So that's what I wanted to say. In the interest of time, I would not open up for questions until we completed all the presentations. I hope that is okay. Yeah, thank you. Now let's move to the next speaker, Mr. James Bata. Are you ready?
Yes, the last speaker should
you should close you should close the sharing. So you needed to click that screen share and just move it out.
Yeah.
Others can share.
Yeah, I am trying.
Thank you.
Is my screen visible?
No, I think Dr. Johan needed to. Yes, now it's okay. Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
I have the floor. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. My presentation will be looking at the COVID-19 climate change and the unsustainable management of the environment as they relate to national security and poverty reduction in Malawi. We can see that from this graph, which is the baseline just before COVID and after COVID by the estimates from the World Bank, that the poverty rates were actually going down between 1990 and 2008. But for sub-Saharan Africa, we can see that it was not going at the very fast rate compared to other regions of the world. So sub-Saharan Africa was still making some progress, but at a very low rate. If we look at the baseline data by the World Bank in this study, which was done this year, 2020, we can see that there is a reversal in the progress made in terms of poverty reduction. If we go by $190, $1.90 a day. When we look at this graph, we see that at the base year of 2020, you have a 1.2 percentage increase. This is for 2020, if we call it the base year. But if we have a more pessimistic view of it, we can see that the poverty is increasing by the same way, the worsening situation. By 2021, the poverty rate will actually increase by about 1.5 in 2020 base year situation. Worsening situation increases to almost 1.9. Studied from the World Bank. When we look at the additional people that will fall into poverty, we see that for the base year, about 26.2 million Africans will fall into poverty. Worsening situation or the pessimistic view, up to 40 million people will fall into poverty as a result of the COVID. And so when we look at it and take it from the point of view that Malawi is one of the poorest countries in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, it means that most of these poor people will be located in Malawi here. The Malawi context, the country is landlocked, unfortunately, with all these problems of being landlocked, and is dependent on agriculture, which is based on the abundant use of natural resources. The country is faced with two interlinked challenges: poverty levels and high degradation of the environment and natural resources. In terms of forestry or deforestation, Malawi has the highest deforestation rate in Southern Africa region, at about between 1.1% and 2.8% per annum. With respect to poverty, the headcount ratio in Malawi is high at 51%. If we look at the more inclusive multi-dimensional poverty index, it is even higher at 66.7. We have some development challenges that have implications in the face of the COVID. First and foremost, investment in the implementation of poverty environment objectives remain very low. Only about 1% of the national budget is devoted to at the district level. And at the district level, that is where most of the production is taking place. And above all, that is where you have most of the poor located. You have about 80% of the people using rain-fed agriculture of landholds. With COVID, we know what that implies in terms of labor shortage. In Malawi, there has been frequent flooding and drought. This has accentuated issues of soil loss and the loss in biodiversity.
We lost you, a voice. Mr. Bata, we lost you. There might be a connection issue there. How should we do? I think there is a connection problem.
Yes, I think so. I can see that.
Yeah, he probably is going to rejoin.
I think we can wait a little bit longer if we can't get Dr. Mbata to join, then we could move on to the next one and then continue.
Right, I think he dropped completely. I guess his internet.
Yeah. So
his
maybe
connection.
Yeah.
Could we move to the next one while we're waiting him to join? I think we're mindful of the timing. Can we get, is Miss Spana Shawakoti ready?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Yes, if you're ready, and we don't see James coming back.
James is back.
James. Oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. How many more slides do you have? Can you summarize your key points?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the internet over here is fluctuating.
I know.
Yes, I'll summarize in a few minutes. What we are saying is that we have about 5.3% of GDP that is lost as a result of unsustainable use of the environment. We also say that the issues of soil erosion, if it is addressed, about 1.8 million people will become lifted out of poverty. In terms of gender agricultural productivity gap done by study by PEI, UN Women, we see that if that gender agricultural productivity gap is covered, 238,000 people will be lifted out of poverty. And so even the COVID change the COVID-19 would actually even provide some opportunity, as we see this as the entry point for Malawi. Few studies have been done in Malawi in terms of COVID-19. Some of the results by the think tank shows that about 18% of the households experience labor disruptions, 56% of the households experience drop in maize production, production most likely to be impacted through land preparation and the rest of them. If you look at this graph here, we see that in terms of procurement of input, 52% of the men are affected and 16% of the women in terms of input. And land preparation is delayed. Is affected by about 31% of the men and 21% of the women. In terms of all aspects of the value chain are affected in the as a result of the COVID. If you look at this from a household survey, we see that all aspects of the food value chain are affected. No price offered by buyers, difficulties in accessing market, number of buyers reduced, and all these have implications for household income and purchasing power. Strategies, what are the strategies? Most African countries like Malawi depend on agriculture and the use of ENR. Regrettably, these countries are characterized by unsustainable use of environment and the impact of climate change. The onset of COVID-19 has added to these problems. Unfortunately, they are not mutually exclusive. And that is the problem here. There is a nexus and feedback effect between COVID-19 and climate change and environmental natural resources uses in Africa. What are the remedies? What are the prescriptions we are putting forward? There is need by the stakeholders to unite in a comprehensive effort and combat the issue of climate change and environmental and natural resources management. Such efforts should include leveraging public budget to sustainable environment. As I said, and as we are looking at some of these presentations, we are still talking at the national level. Things don't happen at the national level. They happen at the district level. They happen at the village level. And unless we move resources to those national and district level, not much is going to there. Women in Malawi are responsible for foodhold. As you know, climate smart agriculture has shown in Malawi to close the agricultural productivity gap, and that has lifted a lot of people out of poverty already. We should focus on that. From international data and what we are seeing, men are more largely affected than women by the COVID. It means that in Malawi, the women are taking additional responsibility. Unfortunately, they don't have the additional resources. We should move the resources to them. In conclusion, the basic principle of resilient and sustainable agriculture for legitimate food security and poverty reduction through sustainable management of the environment is highly applicable to the case of another external factor like the COVID-19. This is because the greater the investment in sustainable environment and climate change, the more the system is productive and resilient to food insecurity and poverty, even in the face of diseases like COVID, at least in the short run. But in the long run, what will be needed will be a systematic planning and budgeting that mainstreams COVID as it is mainstreaming issues of HIV and the other things into national and district level budgets. And above all, implementation is very, very important. We see that a lot of planning is going on, but not much is being implemented. Policy coherence is important. Most of the policies and mechanisms are seen in silos, and they are not comprehensive enough to address the combined effect of COVID, sustainable management of the environment, and the climate change, at least in the short run. In the long run, what will be needed will be highly innovative policy research to be able to identify those factors, entry points that will yield the highest benefits in response to challenges of COVID-19, climate change, and to limit the effect of the negative impact of COVID change. Much research is needed to see where the country has a competitive advantage and where it will derive the highest benefit. All the integrated approach, if put together, the way the world, the way the countries have tried to fight HIV and put it into fighting the issues of climate change and COVID-19, I'm sure that the impact on food security and the poverty reduction would be highly commendable and will go a long way to reduce poverty and food insecurity in most needed areas, like a country like Malawi, where most of the people, about 66.7 people of them, live in poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. I think that was a very comprehensive presentation where flashed out the agriculture-dependent country and what the challenges are. But I really like your concluding remark and kind of all-level capacity building and also work collaboratively and emphasizing the importance of the science research. And those are very, and then of course, integration, integrated approach. And that's very good. In the interest of time, we go to the next speaker and we leave the discussions at the end. Okay, Ms. Shirakati, are you ready? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, I'm ready. Am I being heard?
It's your time.
Okay, thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for UNEP and all the partners for this opportunity. It's very wonderful to be here. So I'll just go with my presentation. Sorry, where is the next slide? Okay, so before I go on to the impact of COVID on food and nutrition security, I'll just try to get you to the context of Nepal. As you all know that it's a very small country between two large economy of China and India. Agriculture is, Nepal is primarily agriculture-based country with 27% of GDP. And it also contributes to the formal sector of employment, about 20%. But largely, this is a informal sector, but the very important key driver to reduce the poverty. Our farming system is basically subsistence farming, and we're gradually shifting to the commercializations. But interestingly, another important feature in our economy is the remittance. Almost 30% of GDP is from the remittance, reaching to 56% of the households. And due to this increasing migration, the trend of migration in the last few years, we have seen that there are 30% of cultivated land, especially in the hills and mountains, are being abandoned, remain fallow. There is growing feminization of agriculture, but at the same time, due to the remittance, the income has grown in the rural community, and it has also contributed in reducing the poverty in the last 20 years from 42% to 19%. I'm not talking about the multi-dimensional poverty here, but this is the general figure. In terms of food security, in the urban areas, 29% of households and 38% in the rural areas are food insecure. But in terms of the nutrition indicators, Nepal is improving in the few years, in these many years. And also interestingly, because this is very highly vulnerable to natural disasters, globally, Nepal has been ranked as 4th in terms of vulnerability to climate change and 13th in the flood risk. So these extreme events has negatively impacted food and nutrition security of the vulnerable population, especially women and children. And these two events together drives them to further poverty. And interestingly, we have because 3 distinct agroecology in the country. So the population distribution and the key indicators of food and nutrition security, poverty, the vulnerability differs in these regions. And so the implication of the COVID and the climate change is different on different segment of the population. And we've also realized that for the sustainable growth of the agriculture production, a climate resilient agriculture and resilient to the external shocks such as COVID-19 and others, and import substitutions and export promotion of high value crops. This is very key to improve the food and nutrition security and also in reducing the poverty in the country. So what has been the impact that was visible during this period? Because in the initial lockdown period and flight suspension and other transportation halts, the impact has been general, like in many other parts of the world. The farmers, agro-entrepreneurs, there was disruption of the supply chain, especially for the inputs. Access to the markets was affected. There was delays in the agriculture operations, and overall demand for the agriculture production and processed food has reduced. Import of chemical fertilizer, which we mostly we import from the other countries. So this was properly halted. Similarly, improved breed, seeds. So all these kind of import were restricted, and also limited technical service could reach to the farmers. But if you look at the different categories of farmers, we see that in the subsistence farming, they were found relatively more resilient in terms of access and stability, but with the limited contribution to the food availability, because of the access to these inputs, they had limited access to the productive inputs. So the productivity was reduced, but still, because of their low dependence on external inputs and they had limited market surplus and I would say the closure market chain, so they were relatively found resilience compared to the commercial farming and peri-urban farming, where they were dependent more on the external inputs and stocks. So you can see in the picture that there's a lot of queue for the chemical fertilizers. People are getting up in the queue despite the risk of the COVID. Similarly, if we see at the large number of migrants, returnees, because as I said, 30% of the GDP comes from the remittance, a lot of migrant returnees were inflowing in the country. So there is lack of employment opportunity in the country, loss of income, and more people to be fed. They also, but one good part of it observed was that because these returnee could contribute to the family labor. So the paddy cultivation, which is because of the chemical fertilizer deficit during the peak season, despite that, but good rain and the family labor contribution could expand actually the area of paddy, and then we're expecting a higher production this year, in contrary to the existing situation. But the daily wage laborer farm workers, the marginal groups, are the one who have suffered very highly from the hunger. We can see the many people, very many organizations coming up to feed these hungry people, and also the different tier of the government is supporting them. Gender issues, yes, because there has been increased women's load, but also there is a decline in their income because they're not able to sell their vegetables or milk to the nearby areas, and intra-household distribution of food, because there's new members added in the family from the migrants, the returnee. So there is a compromise of the food among the family members, especially in the women. And also it was observed that during this transportation and these lockdown periods, many farmers could take their products to the market in the motorbikes and other vehicles, but because of this lack of these skills, women were not able to access the markets. And in quarantine and isolation centers, the kind of food relief that were being provided were not able to address the need of the pregnant and lactating women and the small children. So these are some of the issues that we've observed during the period. But remittance, which we're all expecting that this will go down because of the job loss in the other countries also, but the situation was not that bad. So that means that remittance money was coming and people could still ensure the food were able to procure food and invest in the agriculture sector. But despite these challenges, we had a very good potential of agriculture, enhancing agriculture production, but we have been unable to absorb these migrant workers coming back to the country, and many of them have now reverse trend has been seen, and they're going back to the countries for the job. So during this, what we observe, as a relief programs from the different tier of the government, we have 3 distinct government now, federal, province, and local government. So there were different food relief programs by the government and also non-government actors. But interestingly, we observed that during this distribution, some of the local government were purchasing the local production and including it in their food relief packages, and also including the local food, the superfoods such as buckwheat and finger millets. And also there is a provision now made in the regulation of food sovereignty and right to food. This is the regulation, the law being formulated, and here the special provision for the pregnant and lactating mother, for the children, what should these food relief packages should include. So this has been now learning from the COVID, that we have tried to put that into our legal documents also. The strengthening market system was observed. It was a lot of support from this government for the transport of the farmers' produce, and I can see that there is a lot of potential for these agriculture transport companies, particularly focusing on the agriculture transport. Private sector can come forward in this kind of crises. And another is that a positive signal that we saw in the market was the digital marketing of agriculture produce. Many private companies emerged, but the challenge is still on how these companies can sustain in the future and how this can be linked to the producers. So role of agriculture cooperative is also very key in this issue. And different market outlets is also required. When there is a wholesale market or the bigger market, but there are the small markets where farmers can directly sell to the producer. That is also what we have felt is needed, and local government can support on this one. Many policy support mechanisms were there, some announcement of minimum support prices, there's an enterprise survival funds, and then skill development program for the youth. There's subsidized loan announced by the Ministry of Finance, and promotion of agriculture insurance. So these are some of the policy support that were provided. Investment on the agriculture, we have realized that because of the trade restriction in different countries, we have realized that we need to have our buffer stock. We are basically rice eating countries, so this should be the buffer stock of the major staple. So Food Management and Trading Company, this is a state-owned company, they have increased their target for buffer stock for this current fiscal year. And also we have realized that for the perishable commodities, they need a lot of cold rooms and cold storage need to be provided to manage during the crisis. So this has been, we have learned, and this has been now reflected in our annual programs. In strengthening seed system, I think this will be followed in the second session. Also the fallow land have been cultivated by the family labor, and many incentives are provided by the local and province government to put this land into this fallow land into production. Also, in terms of investment on climate adaptive technologies, we have different documents in place, we have different plan and programs in place, but we're currently, as of now, I'm working in the province government, and we're formulating climate investment plan, and this is going for different provinces also. So we've realized that, for enhancing the resilience of these communities, be it the natural calamity or this kind of external shock such as 19, it is very important that we have to improve the income and living standard of the community so that they can invest and adapt better in terms of climate change, and also food and nutrition security is ensured. So any income generating activities is very critical. And also the strong coordination among the three tiers of the government. We have three different government, and we are new to it. This is the third year that the three government are now in the development field. So there is sometimes there's a conflict of the role and the priorities set by different government. This is a newer challenge that we have been facing, whether it be the relief programs or managing other isolation centers or other health facilities. So in conclusion, what I would like to express here is that because this is a new kind of crisis, global crisis with the prolonged threat to both human health and economy, and this can negative whatever gains we have made so far in terms of SDG goals or the MDG goals or the national priority goals. So we need to set investment priorities based on this learning. So how the South-South cooperation can probably set the investment priorities for the next few decades, and also the contingency planning and preparedness is required in terms of relief and response mechanism and sharing of the best practices. And this planning and preparedness should be for the regional basis, because in the individual level, when the crisis of this global scale, and which affects more than a region, then this kind of regional contingency plannings are also required. And we need to revisit these SDG and other national goals and policy goals. We were intended to achieve some of these goals by 2025, graduation from the least developing countries. So these goals now need to be reshifted, and we have to invest on how best and how fast we can receive this goals. And also the sharing of learnings on the collaboration of different actors from different parts of the countries, and how the private sectors and how government has come into working together. I think we need to share this through this cooperation. And with that, I end my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very rich set of information that we can observe. But I think what I had remembered and understand is that different types of farming system hit by the COVID-19 coupled with climate change differently. But you did offer some best practices, and which were very much of something that we can discuss later on. But one of the things is really like subsistence farming really are more resilient towards this, but it had limited supply. So there's a pros and cons. Thank you very much. We can have a discussion later on. Now we're going to our last presentation of this session. So Ms. Eleno Cuoco, are you ready? Hello? Are you ready? You need to turn on your mic. Your microphone is mute. Can you unmute your mic? On the left bottom side, there is like a mute or unmute.
Yes,
Now.
I think it's okay now.
Yes, thank you. Please go
Okay.
ahead. You can put as a presentation. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Eleonore from Burundi, and I'm program specialist in women economic empowerment, in charge of nutrition, food security. Everything can help to have a balanced diet. I will just pass through the context and highlight that in Burundi, climatic disasters are recurrent, and there are floods, drought, landslide, and these disasters affect people, and 55% of these people affected by disasters are women and girls. And what we can notice is the consequences of this disaster are land degradation, flooding of arable lands, loss of crops, loss of household income sources, and all these make nutrition, food remains a major challenge, because 67% of the population cannot afford nutrition food. And concerning the gender equality, we can say that breastfeeding and pregnant women, girl mothers and children are the most affected because of gender inequality and institutional vulnerabilities. 54% of children under 5 years are affected by chronic malnutrition. And in the country, we have a percentage of 44% of people who are in malnutrition. And the main very important things to know is the women contribute a large part of food security, because they are the main food producer, and they play a key role in catalyzing rural transformation that ensures sustainable livelihoods. Smallholder farms are the main provider of food and employment. And when you see the economic of Burundi, it's based on agriculture, and the women contribute to 55%, but there are a lot of inequalities. The only 17% own land. They can have access to agricultural credit for women head of households, because they don't have counterparts required for agricultural credit, such as land and loan, and they cannot access the factors of production. And even if they product, they can't control the income at home because of gender-based violence. And concerning the COVID, for sure, COVID has accentuated the food crisis in the country, because there are reduction of agricultural activities, borders were closed, so there is a low inflow of agricultural input and food product from bordering countries, and significant decline in food imports due to the higher transaction cost and declining domestic demand. And as women are at the front line and center of caring for the sick in the household, this exposes them to contamination, but reduce their working time in the households and in the business, resulting in decreased productivity and ability to meet nutritional needs. And this is one point I want to emphasize, the challenges. In Burundi, the challenges persist in the area of food security and nutrition. And the main ones are related to the integration of nutrition in the health services package, the prevention and management of anemia in women of childbearing age or pregnant women, supplementation in pregnant and breastfeeding women, promotion of key family practices in nutrition. This is highlighted because in Burundi, there are a lot of food, but the problem is how to cook and provide balanced diet for the household. That is the problem. So this is a fact where we will focus our action. We have also the increase of the state budget allocated to nutrition, food fortification and the production of therapeutic foods, and the establishment of a center of excellence in nutrition. As I just said, we have to teach women how to cook a good food, a balanced diet to avoid malnutrition. We have also the integration of the management of malnutrition in medical and paramedical training curricula, the availability of a gender-sensitive database on nutrition. And finally, what is very, very important for us here, how to value the role of the women in the fight against food security and nutrition, because they are the caregivers. It's women who provide food on the table. So if we involve them and we invest on women at different level, we think we can reduce malnutrition and food security in Burundi. So the strategy we apply here is to empowering women for sustainable food security. And strategically we decided, and we are providing technical and financial support to the Ministry of Gender, which is establishing a bank for women. We think if we can facilitate women access to saving, to credit, that can help them to increase production, foods. We have also development of policy strategies to reduce disparities in agriculture for nutrition and rural livelihoods. We need to work to focus on community level too, because we need to strengthen the management capacity of women members of cooperative so that they can position, they can integrate, they can benefit from the agri-food value chain, like maize, rice, palm oil, wood, which contribute to food security. And one of our focus is innovation, how to integrate renewable energies and new technologies in agriculture value chain. This is a good thing, and we think that can help us to reach our targets. And especially on nutrition, we want to focus on female-headed households so that they can improve their livelihood, adopt, diversify, and practice essential habits that improve nutritional status. And to begin, we have advocated with the scaling up nutrition to take into account gender in all the strategy, the national strategy. And programmatically, we establish saving groups and a network for nutrition, and we use positive masculinity to engage men and youth to involve in the nutrition, in the malnutrition fighting, because men decide what people, the household would eat. If we can transform them, we can change their behavior, maybe they can take good decision on what they also can eat to balance diet. And we want also to standardize or promote the local production. And what we have done is to partner with media, journalists, so that they can make a broadcast, song, everything that can inform people. My last point is how to improve food security and to fight against nutrition what we can suggest is to increase investment to strengthen agricultural productivity capacity, especially for small older farms who are majority women. We want also to develop strategies, policies to reduce disparities in agriculture, including improvement of food and nutrition security and rural livelihoods. And we want to focus on renewable energies, the use of digital, which allow the reduction of production, transformation, marketing costs, time, energy, and protect environment too. And the last point, which is our fight here, is to reinforce women technical, managerial, and leadership capacity to access economic, agricultural, and technological resources in order to help them contribute to food security and nutrition, because they play a key role in the household, in the community, and in the country. Thank you very much. Murakoze.
Thank you very much, Lena. It was a very excellent presentation. I think this is the one really specifically focused on engendered kind of impacts and interventions. And I especially like your kind of a practice or best practice, empowering women for sustainable food security, and also for, you know, if investing in women, you could reduce food insecurity and also malnutrition. So I like that message, but I think, I know we are over time, but can we, you know, I plead Gulam going to be the next session. We have a few questions in the chat box, but mostly are commenting and talking about agriculture extension service using digital technologies, and they were something that they offered as a training, farmer-to-farmer training video. So I hope that Ahmed, this person who produced, there's a kind of link there I could share with you later on. But there was a question specifically talking about how the role of renewable energy it's playing across the food value chain. So, and then that's the second one. The other one, and people are challenging about the zero hunger target. I don't know what was the question there, but I saw that one. So I wanted to give each panelist, if you can respond, and you are also included, if you can comment on those. There were many commenting, but there are questions related to the role of renewable energy, and that's in the process, and how we see ending zero hunger, that target, and how at the practical level we can to reverse that one. So I wanted each panelist, including you, to give a kind of a concluding kind of response or comment or remark, and then we conclude. I apologize to Ghulam in the next session for prolonging it and shorten our break.
This is okay.
Thank you, Ghulam. Yo, you wanted to start?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm here. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm not a specialist in renewable energy, so I'm going to leave that up to the other members of the panel who may have more knowledge on the issue. I think on the towards moving towards zero hunger, I ended with that slide. Okay, with the study, the CERES 2030 study, and essentially what they identify in their recommendations or the conclusions, if you want, okay, is that it's really important to identify to invest in kind of 3 different groups, if you want, of investment levels. Okay, one is very much into basically empowering farmers, okay, making them stronger to participate. And so this can be through investments in farmers organizations, both at the political level and also at the economic level, so they're in a better bargaining position vis-a-vis other agents in the food chain, but also to participate in policy discussions so that the policies are really benefiting them that are being introduced in the country. The other one is investments in the food system, okay, so beyond the farm. And so there clearly, there's a number of different things that we can do. We should not forget that. So we often talk about poverty with smallholder farmers, but a lot of poor people are also involved in the food system. I mean, the small-scale traders, small-scale food shops, and things like that, services, etc. So there's a lot of we can do for poverty reduction to invest besides in the farms, and then of course investment in at the farm level and at other stages as well. And for example, to reduce food losses and waste is an obvious area to invest in, I think. And then in things like infrastructure, technical assistance, some of the, what was also referred to one of the people in the things in basically in extension services, technology, etc. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, you. And anywhere else wants to have an intervention? A brief one.
Yes, Enox.
Yes.
Just to follow up with what Johan said, in terms of zero hunger, of course, technically, yes, from first level economics, we know that poverty can be eradicated, but scarcity cannot. The problem is the way the resources are distributed and the way they are used. So if we are even to redistribute and in terms of trying to achieve equity of what we have today, we can eliminate poverty. But the problem is, how do we do it in the longer run? People are very, self-centered. Of course, is another point of, self-interest in economics. So that can be achieved. But then to achieve it in sub-Saharan Africa, it requires much more. Many more people are in the area of agriculture. And therefore, in fact, the work we did in the World Bank when I was there showed that no matter which country you come from, the net profit you can gain from, say, per hectare of a farm is about $600 to $1,000 per hectare. So the more people you have on that farm, the more they are sharing that amount, the more poverty persists in sub-Saharan Africa. The point is the value chain movement. How do we move people out of the farm? I'm losing you again. And then how do we move people out of the farm and along the value chain, create value chain, so that less people are on the farm level, but jobs are created along the value chain of production, marketing, selling, and the rest of them. That is where the interest will come. And this is linked to the renewable energy. Again, the renewable energy, UNDP has tried some work here. You know, it comes up to purchasing power. We tried even to give them subsidies. They still go back to charcoal, which has a very serious implication on the environment, just because they don't have the purchasing power even to subscribe the renewable energy at a subsidized rate. It is a problem. Which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? I think if we're able to reduce poverty, people can move into renewable energy, and that is the way to go. Thank you very much.
Anybody else who wants to make an intervention before we have a break?
And in the question on the use of renewable energy, that I'm from Nepal and working for the government of Nepal, and we already have in the province I'm working, we have this climate smart villages being where these climate friendly technologies that also includes the renewable use of renewable energy, especially the solar irrigation and also the solar drying, some processing. These were already in practicing, and I think this is even more important, especially in this kind of crisis, where if they are not able to sell their produce immediately in the market, they have other means to preserve and process the food. And in terms of zero hunger challenge, because Nepal has also target to get the zero hunger challenge by 2025, but with this pandemic now this target seems we have to extend the period and revisit some of the action plans that were made and the investment were made. So I think we need to redefine our priorities and identify the actions to minimize these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo that. I visited some of the solar power irrigation system in Nepal. It was a climate smart agriculture program with CGIAR. So they had done a great job there. That's probably one way of resilient way of coping with this kind of crisis. And Lena, if you want, do you want to make an intervention? Our last speaker, I guess, dropped from the line, but you have a chance to make a remark if you want before we break.
Yes.
Please.
Yes, I want to respond to one of the question, the issue of gender discrimination in agriculture. Yes, that is the reality, and we have made a study here and gender gap in agriculture, and a lot of things were barriers. Here, a woman cannot have land as heritage. They don't have access to land because it's a patriarchal country. So we can advocate. We just advocate and we just put front of all the people what women can do, because they are more than men in agriculture. They contribute in the economic of the country. If we support them, if we try to help them, that can help to solve our problem. And what is very interesting is some government officials support us. Early in this month, some governors of a province allowed land to women groups to cultivate, but not to rent. So this is what we can do. With the studies, the findings of the studies, we can make strong advocates and advocacy. And this advocacy, we are not alone. We work with all the UN system agencies and the civil societies network. It's a fighting. It cannot end, but we try to buy in all these people to value women and see their contribution in food security and malnutrition. This is what I wanted to share.
Thank you very much. And we could prolong the discussion for a longer time. I'm mindful we've already 20 minutes past the planned time, but I think has been a very good discussion. We have lots to pick up. And I have a last question to the panelists because there were some attendees wants to ask whether we could share the PowerPoints. We can decide later on, but we'll write to you, or if you, no, I see everybody nodding their head, so probably we can. I think this is also a way of stimulating more discussions later on, if there's nothing confidential. So if you allow us, we will publish it on the website. James, are you okay with sharing PPTs? Thank you. With that, I wanted to thank all the panelists for the excellent presentation. I apologize for pushing you because there's so many information and we have so little time. And get the flavor, but we'll continue, as Kerstin was saying, we will continue to work on this kind of aspect even after the workshop, because this is not one-time off thing. So thank you all very much. Could I suggest we have a 5 minutes break and we coming back? Because I think in more or less the same group of attendees. And then if that's okay, Gulam, are you ready, huh? Yeah. Yeah, 5 minutes and then we come back and we stretch and then you call and we start. I think all the panelists are on kind of joined now for your session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're off to a good start.
I believe so. Haha, we're back.
We are back. I think we can start again, and it's going to be over to Dr. Rasool.
Gulam. Where's Gulam?
I'm sure he's joining us shortly.
Our panelists are all here.
Start your video.
Gulam.
Yes. Is it okay? I'm here now? Because there was some.
Okay. We
Okay.
probably can start.
There we go. Yes.
Yes. We can start now. Okay.
Over
Thank
to
you.
Gulam.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we
Thank
can.
you. Thank you, Dr. Jiang, and the panelists of the first session. Actually, it was a very nice and informative session. We'll just continue. I would like to welcome everyone to our second session of the theme on poverty alleviation, food and nutrition security in the context of COVID-19 and climate change. I think we have about 70 minutes now in this session, and we will deal with three important questions posed in the program. I will just, for the benefit of the participant, I would like to highlight the three questions in this session we are dealing with. The first question is, to what extent the double crisis of COVID-19 and climate change affected access to food and nutrition security in the global south, particularly how it is affecting differently to the women and children. The second question deals with the poverty. Food poverty is a critical issue. What needs to be done differently by public sector and private sector to address the food poverty? The third question is the global health crisis, climate change, natural disaster may continue. How can multilateralism, global partnership, and South-South cooperation can support to address these challenges? So these are the three important questions. We are dealing with this question. Fortunately, we have a very good panelist. We have 5 distinguished panelists. The first panelist is the first speaker is the Dr. Jared Bozere. He's from UN Environment. The second panelist, Dr. Ganesh Thapa. Dr. Ganesh Thapa is an agricultural economist. He's from Nepal, but worked about 20 years in IFAD. The next speaker is Mr. Mustafa Hamid Jia. He's from the government of Afghanistan. Our next speaker is from Pakistan, Mr. Mir Muhammad Sogir. He's a project director of poverty alleviation program in South Punjab, Pakistan. He's from the government of Pakistan and from the IFAD, Pakistan. Our last not the least panelist is Mr. Solomon Makuja. He's a country director of Gardens for Health International. He's from Rwanda. So with this, I would like to request to our speaker to speak about 10 minutes. Even shorter is better, so that we have more time for discussion. After all the 5 panelists presentation, we'll open for a question and answer session. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Jared Bozere for his presentation. Dr. Jared, the floor is yours. Yes.
Good and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for inviting me to make this presentation. As it has been indicated, my name is Jared Bozere from UNEP, Nairobi Convention. Nairobi Convention is one of the UNEP regional CS programs, which is focusing on supporting governments in the East African region. Colleagues have given a lot of detail on COVID and the impacts on food security, and also a lot of emphasis also on climate change and food security. I'm going to bring in an environmental perspective because there's that important nexus between food, the environment, and climate change and other impacts as well. So the The Western Indian Ocean region is the area that the convention serves. We serve 10 contracting parties from the mainland states of Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, and then the adjacent island states. It's a very important area because 65 million people in these countries live within 100 kilometers of the coast. So they depend heavily on coastal and marine resources. The economic value of the marine and coastal resources in the region is about 20 billion US dollars per year, with a total asset base of around 330 billion dollars. So very, very significant. And the region is important for both environmental and economic implications as well. Now, there are various, of course, coastal and marine resources which drive coastal and national economies in these areas, ranging from, coral reefs, seagrass beds to mangroves, which support a number of socioeconomic industries, from fisheries to tourism, among other sectors. Now, before we even talk about COVID, the coastal and marine resources are always facing a number of traditional threats, ranging from biodiversity and habitat loss, illegal fishing, overfishing, pollution. Then coupled with climate change, there are also a number of important drivers of change, including inadequate governance, but there are also new and emerging opportunities, economic opportunities, which have an impact on the resources, and that includes oil and gas, for instance, infrastructure developments, which includes ports, railways, roads, and harbors, and the implications of all these new and emerging opportunities on the integrity of coastal and marine resources. For those of you who may have seen the Living Planet report for the year 2018 and 2020, it indicates that over the last about 40 years, which is pretty much within our lifetime, the world has lost about 67% of the population of major species, biodiversity. That is very, very significant. And when we look at the different biomes, the terrestrial environment within that period has lost about 38% of the population of major species. The freshwater biome is actually the one that has suffered the most, lost about 81%. And many species from the freshwater ecosystems have become extinct as well. The marine environment has lost about 36% of the population of species within this 40 years period from the 1970s until now. And this is extremely, extremely significant. And therefore, we need to focus on bending the curve on biodiversity loss. And for that to happen, there will be a number of decisive actions that will need to be taken. Some of those will include reducing the rates of deforestation, reducing the rate of overfishing, ensuring that we are investing in sustainable financing, reducing the rates of consumption, among other actions that will require to be taken so as to bend the carbon biodiversity loss. The question is, are we working at a scale that matters, that can enable us to have some decisive actions that can actually turn or bend the carbon biodiversity loss? We, as the first speaker indicated, we are actually living beyond a number of planetary boundaries, meaning that we are operating within a very unsafe zone, and therefore decisive action will be required actually to turn the tide and ensure that we are living within the reasonable limits of the various planetary boundaries. Now, the food sufficiency irony for the continent is that the continent still, the continent in this case meaning Africa, has quite some substantial land that can potentially be available as arable land for farming. As you notice on the curve, on the graph which is on the left, the orange one indicates the land that is arable and currently under agriculture. The green one indicates the area that is potentially available to expand, agricultural production. The challenge is most of this land is available in areas which have high biodiversity, and that therefore the approach will need to be different. The curve that the graph that follows indicates the scale of severity in nutrition across the different parts of the globe, from the developed world to the developing world. And the challenges are around, climate change, especially around drought and other challenges. I find this graphic here very, very interesting, because even as we talk about expanding agricultural production that may still continue to compromise the integrity of the environment, we have lost opportunities in terms of the food that is wasted and lost. If you look on this map, on this global map, the blue circle indicates the food that is lost, primarily lost while intended for human consumption. And this is lost during production, post-harvest losses, during processing, and also distribution. So as you can see, food loss is a major factor in the developing world, whether it's in Africa or Asia, South America as well. In the developed world, the major challenge is around food waste, food that is actually discarded by consumers. So if we addressed this twin challenge of food waste and food loss, probably we would not need to expand even the areas under agricultural production, because this is very, very significant. And you can see the figures from different parts of the world. Now, unconsumed food actually causes global loss of about $750 billion Kenya shillings per annum, and that is significant. And unconsumed food contributes more than 3.3 billion tons of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere per year. So food loss, food wasted is both an environmental as much as an economic activity. The recent report from the Food Agriculture Organization indicates that about 4 billion worth of food is actually lost in the continent, and this is extremely significant. So probably governments could focus on how to limit food wastage and food loss, and this could deal with the food scarcity problem that we are discussing here. Because we work within the environment sector, we work closely with communities. Communities are engaged in various activities in environmental conservation, from managing marine litter, which is a major crisis in our marine and coastal waters. Communities are closely engaged in reforestation programs, and in a number of areas focusing on environmental conservation. Community involvement is key because they are the stewards of the natural environment. This is where they stay, and by involving them and engaging them proactively, then the interventions will be sustainable. Communities also do engage in a number of sustainable livelihood activities, which range from beekeeping, for instance, in different parts of the region, seaweed farming that provides a number of industrial, that provides raw materials for a number of industrial products, to integrated mariculture, ecotourism, and fisheries as well. So these are actually nature-based livelihood activities which can be sustainable if they are supported well. And these are some of the activities that we directly support through the programs that UNEP and partners is working on, and some of our numbers, and many of our partners in the region. I thought I wanted to promote on one of the innovative projects, which is called Mikoko Pamoja, focusing on mangroves. It is actually the first climate-financed payment for ecosystem services project that was developed in the world, and this is here in Kenya. I remember before I changed job opportunities, I was actually heading the research division for the institution that developed this project, and I was part and parcel of it. The project is selling about 3,000 tons of carbon in terms of credits to the international carbon market. And it is the community that is involved. They are focusing on 107 hectares of mangroves, focusing on planting more of those. And it is the community which is leading these campaigns. And the proceedings from the sale of the carbon credits is supporting a number of community level activities, from ecotourism investments to schools to capacity building. And therefore there are actual impacts at the level of the community. This project received the Equator Award a few years ago and DiCaprio, who is one of the Hollywood stars, is actually involved in supporting this project. Among many other partners, UNEP has directly given funding to this project as well. We work with a number of partners to promote these nature-based livelihood opportunities, as you can see here. I don't have to go through them. The partners range from governments to local communities to conservation organizations or NGOs, research and academia, and even private sector as well. And we have recently started working with regional economic communities and commissions. Empowerment of communities will be critical to ensure that they benefit from these livelihood investments, and that should focusing on training them on sustainable livelihood development opportunities, training in business plan development, establishment and strengthening of value chains that support these livelihood interventions, which will include marketing and the policy support, especially in terms of responsible tax regimes, focusing on these small-scale investments, and lastly, on sustainable financing. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jared. This is a very insightful, exciting presentation. I enjoyed very much. You have highlighted us particularly the threats of both marine biodiversity and terrestrial biodiversity, as well as the important fact you have highlighted the loss of food wastage and food loss, and how it is affecting both economic as well as the carbon CO2 emission, 3.3 billion tons of CO2 emission. So it shows that just managing the food loss or food waste, we can support mitigate considerably climate change, as well as also it is means to saving water and energy and land also from agriculture. So it is huge environmental economic benefit. With this, I would like to now welcome Dr. Ganesh Thapa. Ganeshji, nice to see you here after quite a long time. So now floor is yours. I hope you will bring some development aspect after the environmental aspect of this food and COVID.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rasul, for your introduction. We had a very interesting presentation by the keynote speaker, Dr. Swinnen, on the overall impact of COVID-19 globally. And then we also had excellent country level presentation, at least two presentations from Asia, Bangladesh and Nepal. So I will try to complement what information has so far been shared. And although my focus is on the impact of COVID-19 in identifying opportunities, I will also try to say something about the role of climate change in the new context. Well, several global level estimates show record levels of global cereal production and increases in cereal trade, utilization and stocks, including the one made by FAO, which basically seem to say that the global food production and supply situation is adequate and there is no immediate shortage of food. However, country level analysis in many countries, including in Asia, indicate very significant impacts at the local level, affecting small farmers, migrant workers, wage earners, etc. FAO did an assessment in Bangladesh, and USAID's Feed the Future project did similar kind of analysis in Nepal. And these studies show very significant disruption of food supply chains and farmers facing problems not only in buying their inputs like fertilizer, but also selling their outputs, particularly the perishable ones. I think what is important and what is normally neglected is that the crisis has had very significant and disproportionate impact on women and disadvantaged groups. Dr. Swinnen in his keynote had a slide on the differential impact of the crisis on men versus women. And the regional study conducted by ICIMOD in the Hindu Kush Himalayan areas, the mountain areas of 8 Asian countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, India, etc., also corroborated this effect. And another important point, which is normally missed in this kind of discussion, is the return of migrant workers in some of these mountain areas has increased the flow of labor. There is a reverse flow of labor from urban areas to rural areas, and also from other countries to their home countries. And interestingly, Ms. Sivakoti, in her presentation on Nepal, talked about the positive impact of returning migrants in terms of more availability of family labor and increases in paddy production. But there is also a possibility of a negative impact through increased pressure on farmland and the possibility of displacement of tenants by landowners who return to their villages. So I think there is a need to utilize all available arable land in rural areas, and local governments also need to develop guidelines for inclusive land use at their local level. Now, there has been a very significant increase in the number of people living in extreme poverty, and the Asian Development Bank has estimated that as many as 78 million people actually entered into poverty because of the crisis. This is the additional people which became poor. And perhaps more importantly, without any policy actions, the COVID crisis may actually lead to higher income inequality, lower social mobility among the vulnerables, and lower resilience to future shocks. I think this important is more long-term, more medium-term, and there needs to be more policy actions and program actions to address this issue. World Vision did a very large survey of 14,000 households in 9 Asian countries, and these included India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Indonesia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Mongolia, and Nepal. And this showed that although the crisis started as a health crisis, perhaps the most serious effect was on increased food insecurity. As you can see from the numbers here, 2/3 of the respondents said that livelihoods were fully or severely affected. 1/4 had no food on hand, and 1/3 of the households had only 1 week supply. So very significant impact. And this estimate also showed that up to 85 million households across Asia may have no or limited food stocks. Now, there was a response to address the impact of COVID-19, both at the government level and at the farmers' agribusiness level. As Dr. Swinnen mentioned, the government's stimulus package had the very strong social protection program. And then this actually included mostly food aid and cash transfer. This was true for most of the Asian countries. And another significant help from the government was the availability of low interest bank loans. Just to give you an example, in Bangladesh, almost $590 million worth of subsidized loans was made available to smallholders at 4% interest rate annually. And also there was a very significant program to distribute subsidized inputs, particularly fertilizer and seed. Now, interestingly, farmers and agribusinesses and farmers groups, producer groups also took some initiatives to cope with the crisis. They were able to establish strategic relationship with financial institutes to benefit from innovative rural financial products for both credit and also insurance. And they also adopted more efficient methods of payment, including digital payments. And in some areas, in rural areas, they also benefited by establishing collection centers at the cooperatives level, which have actually helped keep the supply chain functioning even during market closures. Now, in terms of way forward, I think we should see this pandemic as an opportunity to institute some of the reforms that were long overdue in order to increase food security and safety. Although smallholder farmers in Asia and the Pacific provide 80% of the region's food production, yet they are the most vulnerable. So I think this pandemic should be taken as an incentive to enhance their access to technology and quality inputs. This issue has been discussed for long, and this is long overdue, but I think this needs to be emphasized more and more. And there is also a need to create functioning markets for nutritious but perishable foods with attention to potential wastage. And the crisis showed that because of the lockdown and because of the transportation breakdown, farmers were not able to sell their perishable foods like vegetables, fruits, dairy products, meat, etc. So there is a need to develop cold chain facilities at the more local level to improve the functioning of the markets, agriculture markets at the local level. And of course, the promotion of digital technology, including e-commerce, is very, very important to improve food access through two-way flow of information between buyers and sellers, and feedback loop on price, origin, and safety of food products. And finally, I think there is a need to emphasize infrastructure development, not only to improve agriculture productivity, but to also promote sustainability of food production and also to build climate resilience. Now, the current pandemic, together with the lessons that we have learned from recent trade wars, it's likely that it will lead to agriculture policies intended to shorten national food chains. Now, the effort to ensure secure and resilient food supplies should generate greater government support for local farmers, especially in net food importing countries and agriculture produce. So there is, I think, increasing calls among NGOs and industry associations and lobbying groups for pushing for increased localization of agriculture. Even FAO has urged G20 agriculture ministers to pursue localization of agriculture for better preparation against potential crisis. Now, this is an important point in order to improve the food security situation at the local level, but this should not encourage food self-sufficiency at any cost. I think that there is a role for international trade, inter-regional trade, especially to help the food importing countries. And also there is an increased need for emphasis on sustainable agriculture. The global trend toward sustainable agriculture and healthy foods will continue through the crisis and subsequent recovery. And I think this needs to be emphasized more and more. And there is also a concern about the impact of high intensity agriculture and its carbon footprint, the external costs such as fertilizer runoff into rivers and its negative impact on biodiversity. So in this context, I think sustainable agriculture needs to be emphasized. And many countries are designing their COVID-19 recovery packages, mainly funded by the public funds. But we feel that there is a need to design such packages in ways that will accelerate transition to low carbon development pathways and resilience to climate change. Now, finally, I would like to say a few words about the importance of regional and South-South cooperation. Although most of the policy actions will have to be undertaken by the national governments and local governments, I think there is a role for regional and South-South cooperation because of the nature of pandemic, and also because climate change also occurs across boundaries, and there are natural resources that are shared by different countries, including rivers and lakes. So I think regional cooperation is very important. Following the COVID-19 crisis, there has been some movement to promote South-South cooperation. For example, in Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries, the 10 countries in this in Southeast Asia, they developed a framework for COVID-19 response, which addresses concerns across multiple sectors. And there is a very strong South-South cooperation in this. And there is also, I think, a joint research on vaccines and antiviral medicines and enhanced public communication. Now, they have also established a response fund for joint procurement and research. So Southeast Asia is more advanced in promoting some of these regional cooperation initiatives. In South Asia, which is less integrated regionally and which is not doing so well, we're at least able to talk about setting up an emergency fund for COVID-19, a common research platform and sharing of knowledge and equipment. Now, the problem with SARC, the South Asian Regional Cooperation Organization, is that they are highly bureaucratic processes that they adopt, and this may pose a challenge in developing and implementing such a mechanism. Now, it's also important to highlight here that ICIMOD has conducted a regional study on COVID-19 across the Hindu Kush Himalayas. And this study not only analyzes the impact of the COVID crisis in some of the most vulnerable areas, like the mountain areas, where migration is very high, the role of women is very prominent, and where natural disasters and climate change implications are very, very significant. They have come up with very significant recommendations for both regional and South-South cooperation. Having said that, I think more needs to be done to promote South-South cooperation in South Asia and also in Southeast Asia. Well, thank you very much. I would like to stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Thapa, for very excellent presentation, and particularly your emphasis on cooperation, both South-South and even North-South. You highlighted very important point, but because one of the recent trend coming from many countries of the region, that probably emphasis going on self-reliant in food production and food security and more localization of agriculture. Although it might have given some benefit in terms of food transportation and emission, but there is also danger, as you indicated, that it may go against the comparative advantage. Some countries who have no comparative advantage of growing food, if they want to now become self-sufficient, it might have serious environmental consequences as well as the economic consequences. And even in the long run, it may disrupt the global food supply chain as well as national food security. So this is very important point, and particularly we need more cooperation, both North-South and South-South. That is very important. With this, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Mustafa Hamid Jia. He is from Afghanistan Ministry of Finance and Cooperation. Mr. Jia, floor is for you now.
Thank you very much. Hello and good afternoon to all panelists and attendees. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of this event at this particular time where we all, climate change and COVID-19 impacted the whole world, particularly the livelihood of our rural communities. I do not have a presentation, but I will be talking about the interventions of the government in the projects that helped in less impact of COVID-19, also how to cope with climate change in agriculture sector. I'm currently working and responsible for IFAD projects, International Fund for Agricultural Development projects in Afghanistan, and we will be discussing the activities of the project and also the government interventions on how for the during the pandemic, and also how to cope with the climate change. In the context of Afghanistan, both crises of COVID-19 and climate change affected the livelihood of rural people. So more than 40% of the total workforce and more than 70% of the population that lives in rural areas are employed in agriculture sector. So the vulnerability of agriculture sector to increased temperature and changes in rainfall patterns is high. So increased soil erosion, reduced river flows from early snow melt, and the less frequent rain during the peak cultivation and irrigation seasons are the reasons that will impact on agriculture productivity and also crop choice availability. This leads to crop failures due to water shortage, and the amount of potentially productive land left uncultivated will likely to increase. So more water intensive staple crops will become less attractive to the farmers, while a likely increase to more attractiveness of those that are more drought hardy. The poor are obviously the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change in Afghanistan and also COVID-19, but climate change is likely to compound existing food security issues and impact heavily upon those dependent on agriculture economy. The Save the Children, according to a study of our Save the Children, the distributional effects are more likely to fall upon women and children and upon those who are involved in subsistence agriculture and pastoralism. Based on UNDP report, Afghanistan witnessed a very sharp decline in revenue in 2020 due to low economic activities, trade disruptions, and weaker compliance brought on by the pandemic. The government had to adjust the revenue downward from 209 billion AFs to 144 billion. Also, the climate change is making water resources scarce in Afghanistan, and this has become particularly apparent during the recent years of drought, and development efforts are struggling to keep up with those challenges. The effects of environmental degradation and the lower agricultural output reduced the availability of animal feed, which affected the livestock numbers that are estimated to have been reduced by 50% since 1987. In the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation and Livestock, we believe every activity is directly or indirectly contributing to the nutrition and food security and also adaptation to the climate change. Recently, as you all know, there was a Geneva conference on Afghanistan, and the government of Afghanistan presented in the Afghanistan National Development Peace and Development Framework, which provided the Afghan government vision, strategy, and plans for the next 5 years. For the agriculture sector, the program targets to construct cold storages and drying facilities and value-adding processing plants to both build potential export market and also extend the life of crops to aid food security. Also projects aiding in management of watershed and waterways that includes small-scale check dams to increase agriculture productivity, mitigate flood and risk drought in upper catchments, and also prevent sediment transport and soil erosion. All these activities include new irrigation canals to establish water sources and also expand the arable land in the country. It's planned to further increase agricultural productivity, household income in rural areas, improve food security, reduce poverty, and enable agriculture substitution, develop agro industries, and also improve exports. International Fund for Agriculture Development projects in Afghanistan are contributing to overall goal of poverty reduction and resources to the rural farmers. For the past, the current 2 ongoing projects of IFAD in Afghanistan that were started in 2013 and 2016, the interventions and the activities are ongoing, and luckily we can say that all those activities from the beginning was designed in such a way to cope with the climate change and
We've lost him, Ghulam.
Maybe we wait 1 or 2 minutes.
As I mentioned.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yeah. That's the
Hello.
problem with internet.
Hello,
Yeah.
Mr. Jia. Yeah, internet is a big problem. I just listened his voice, but again, what should we do now?
Oh yeah, he's back.
He's back. Okay.
Can you unmute? Yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
lost the connection.
Okay. Okay.
So yes, we will go to.
Okay, the connection is bad again.
Again, he's bad. I think he's.
Yeah.
Climate. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Oh
hear.
yes.
Please go ahead. Yeah. Or what we can do, we can go for next presentation and again give him some time when if his internet gets better. What should we do? Should we?
Yes, I think we can move on. I leave a message in his chat box.
Okay. So please give it. We are moving there. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. I think it is because of internet disruption. So what we'll do, we'll go for our next presenters, and then we'll give again chance to Mohammed Jia. Our next presentation is from Mir Mohammed Sogir. He's a project director. He's a project director of Poverty Alleviation Fund, Government of Punjab, Pakistan. I think he also worked in the IFAD. Mr. Sogir, you are here? Mir Mohammed Sogir?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, I can see you. Thank you very much. Please. Okay. Pleased to welcome you.
Thank you very much.
Good. Floor is now yours. You have to upload your presentation through the screen, share screen. Okay.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Oh, thank you very much. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for this South Cooperation Forum and giving me the floor for the presentation. I will brief the audience about our project and action taken during COVID-19 pandemic. I think let's start the presentation. Yes. IFAD assisted Southern Punjab Poverty Alleviation Project is a joint initiative of Government of Punjab, Pakistan and International Fund for Agriculture Development. Basically, this project is a community-driven project and all the interventions are being implemented through community organization. I would like to explain the major issues in the project area. These are the major issues in the project area. The first one is the highest incidence of poverty in Southern Punjab, poor socioeconomic status, low literacy and school enrollment rates, skewed distribution of land, flood-prone area, gender inequalities, limited access to income generating opportunities for women, lack of asset, landless, exploitative and gender-biased arrangement of the income. The major priorities of the our project is poverty reduction through big push poverty graduation approach. Women lead and participate in decision-making process. Women are economically empowered and benefited from the project interventions. Property rights, income generation through provision of the productive assets, and enabling the youth and women for employment and self-employment opportunities through vocational enterprise training. Enabling poor communities for adoption of safely managed sanitation services, food security, and improved farming productivity. The main objective of the project is to increase the income of 232,450 poorest household by enabling the employment potential of the people and increasing agriculture productivity and production through asset transfer, vocational entrepreneurship training, productivity enhancement initiatives, small-scale community physical infrastructure schemes, low-cost housing for the poor women. Project is using three targeting approach. The first one is the geographical targeting. The second one is the household and poverty targeting. And third one is the gender targeting. SPAP is following a poverty-focused approach by using the information generated by the National Poverty Scorecard data to identify the household in the poorest band having poverty scorecard 0 to 23, and by using a pro-poor approach in the identification of the project activities. How SPAP ensure the inclusion of the poor women in the project intervention? Here you can see that these are our major interventions: small ruminants, small land plots, vocational enterprise training, revolving fund and productivity enhancement initiatives, food bank, and community physical infrastructure schemes, especially focus on for the beneficiary having poverty scorecard 0 to 23. Gender targeting and women inclusion. Basically, SPAP is a very gender sensitive project. And inclusion of the women ensured by specifying women as an either sole beneficiary of an intervention, or inclusion of the women ensured by specifying sole beneficiary or specifying quota for them. For example, here you can see that our major intervention, small ruminants, especially 100% women are beneficiary. In small land plot, 100%, vocational training 60%, revolving fund 60% beneficiaries are female. In food bank, 89% beneficiaries are women, and community physical infrastructure schemes especially focus on women. SPAP response during the COVID-19 pandemic. Provision of the small ruminants. Project has provided 32,810 small ruminants, 2 goat package to 16,405 poor families during COVID-19. 100% beneficiaries are poor women having poverty scorecard 0 to 18. Local adoptable breed has been provided. The purpose is to assist the women to generate independent income. Health and nutrition improves by using the goat milk at home. Goat are easily rare for poor families in the rural settlement. Offsprings are easy to sell even during lockdown. Provision of small land plots and housing unit. Project has provided 1,438 small land plots and housing unit to the shelterless ultra poor families having poverty scorecard 0 to 11. Legally, ownership title of the land plots house in the name of women of the house, which is the key for the women empowerment. The purpose is to improve their well-being, expand their livelihood, and lift themselves out of the poverty. A complete housing structure helps to maintain social distancing at home. Access to toilet and hand wash facility at home improves hygiene and reduce open defecation during the COVID-19 risk. Uninterrupted electricity from solar system makes home living comfortable, encouraging people to stay at home. Kitchen gardening and plantation. This activity has been done during the COVID. All the beneficiaries have been mobilized, sensitized to plant at least 4 fruit or non-fruit sampling in their house. Certified seed for kitchen gardening provided with the support of Agriculture Department. The purpose is to enable poor household to get organic and hygiene vegetable fruits at their doorsteps. Plantation would have also a long-lasting effect on environment. Food security through food bank. Especially we have established food bank in different rural areas, and during the COVID, wheat grain up to 150 kg provided each poor household having national poverty scorecard 0 to 18. 89% beneficiaries are directly women, and food bank reduce the risk of starvation and contribute to improving the health and nutrition. Agriculture-based water conservation schemes. Additional resources or efficient use of available resources are required to cope up with the pandemic stock. To cater the issue, project has constructed improved water channels, courses, constructed water pond reservoirs, installed solar-based irrigation tube well for the small farm holders, tenant, poor household. This increased water saving, reduce water logging, decrease time, improve in yield, and increase in command area. Vocational enterprise training. During the pandemic, this situation, vocational enterprise training provided to 6,584 and 1,921 beneficiaries, respectively, by following the late COVID SOPs. 60% women beneficiaries with special focus on youth, having scorecard 0 to 23, stipend and food amount average to rupees 8,350 rupees to each distributed among the 6,504 pass out trainees of vocational training program. Stipend and food amount to each distributed among the pass out trainees of enterprise training program. Awareness sensitization session with training of COVID-19 preventions. Productivity enhancement initiative. Modern agriculture implements through service providers. Financial inclusion through revolving fund activities. Project provided soft loan to 4,000 poorest household, small farmers having poverty scorecard 0 to 23, who are normally excluded in the MFI. Microfinance institution, 65% beneficiaries are women. These are the major actions which we have taken during the pandemic. Basically, SPAP is a community-driven project, and all the interventions are being implemented through community organizations. During the COVID, about 1,522 CEOs formed in their orientation training special session arranged on the prevention of COVID, usage of masks, social distancing, staying home, isolation in case of.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mohammed Tawhid, very interesting presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. SPAP future plan. This is our plan and our output indicators. In future, we have to address more than 100,000 ultra poor household having poverty scorecard 0 to 23, or to expand the geographical area from 6 to 10 districts. These are our output level indicator for the future plan. Recognition of the SPAP intervention. These are the major recognition of the SPAP. In the last year, SPAP has been declared as the best performing project in terms of gender, women, and girl empowerment targeting approach, and declared as a winner for the FAST Gender Award in the Asia and Pacific region. May this pandemic end soon and world could revive to this original pace. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mir Mohammad Sogir. I know that you have a lot of things to share, but our time is short, but it's very interesting. Please share your presentation so that every participant can go through it. It will be very, very useful. And particularly in the Pakistan, I think I like the idea of food bank. I think this is one of the very interesting idea, like COVID and other challenges. And thank you so much on that. Now,
Thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you very much. You are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we will go to our next presentation, Mr. Solomon Mukaja. He's the country director, Gardens for Health International. He's from Rwanda. Mr. Solomon, you have 10 minutes, but shorter is better. We already little shortage of time. After that, again, we'll again come back to Muhammad Jia, Mustafa Hamid Jia. Now floor is Solomon.
Thank you so much and greetings everyone. I will begin my brief talk with a very brief video about our work. So if the technical team could pull it up, that would be great.
Nari naje mu murima w'ubuzima nta mboga nagiraga sibyo numvaga mfite ikibazo kuko naziryaga ari uko nzisabye twagiye gupimisha abana numvishije ngize ikibazo baratubwira bati baba batujuje ibiro bati ntimugire ubwoba nta kibazo tubona baradufashemo natwe twize ibyo guhinga imboga ibindi twize ni iby'isuku konsa ko gukaraba intoke ugateka amazi ukayanywa asukuye naratekerezaga ntubu nahinga imboga gute ko ntazi gukora udutabo ariko tumarije kubyiga narabimenye ukuntu bakora udutabo n'ukuntu bazitera bakaziha intambwe ibyo byatumye rero ngira ubushake bwo gukomeza kuza ndabihinga eba izi ni dodo izi ni betarave ahandi hepfo yaho ni sukuma wiki ubu turazihinga tukazirya tutagiye kuzihaha tukazishikira tuzikuye mu kwacu nta kibazo tufite hari umwe nabonaga adafite morali yo kurya ariko ubu iyo ntetse ibiryo ngashiramo imboga mbona afite morali yo kurya nanje nahise mpitamo ndavuga ntubu nta nkono ntazongera gutekamo itarimo indyo yuzuye igizwe n'amabarane nahisemo ndavuga ntinzaje ndateka indyo yuzuye irimo icyatsi umweru umutuku cyangwa oranje mbona ari nta kibazo ahubwo mbonaga nzaje ndigisha n'abandi kuko ari abantu bagera nko muri uriya murima bakavuga ubu bumenyi wabukuye hehe bimeze bite ahubwo natwe ngo uzatwigishe ni ukuyibwira ntibatere nk'uko naba mfite umurama waba ushaka akaza nkamugurisha cyangwa nkamuha ku busa nta kibazo nawe kugira ngo agende aragira umurima w'ubuzima.
Thank you so much. So I will dwell on Elminata's story to share what we do very briefly and respond to the proposed questions for reflection. As you may have seen, Gardens for Health is for impact organization working at the intersection of health and agriculture to provide community-based participatory solutions to malnutrition in Rwanda. And why do we do what we do? As you may know, the majority of world's people are farmers, and yet they remain in poverty, and millions of children are malnourished. This means that a lot of smallholder farmers are farming, and yet children and expectant mothers aren't eating a diet that provides for their bodies and nutritional needs. Now, the simple concept that access to food alone doesn't equal good nutrition is at the core of what we do in Rwanda. For more than a decade, we have been working with incredible women like Eliminata, who you've just seen in the video, to integrate nutrition and health within the food system. That is from the garden to the table, to ensure that she and many more communities have access not only to food, but to nutritious foods that make up a healthy diet. Now we do this by providing nutrition, health, agriculture, education, coupled with quality agricultural inputs to smallholder farmers to enable them grow and consume healthy food from their own backyards. We have also had a chance to partner with the government of Rwanda and the World Food Programme to extend our model in schools. As it has been thoroughly described, and as you may have noticed, this video was produced before COVID-19, and smallholder farmers like Eminata were hit the hardest. So COVID-19 reached Rwanda in mid-March, and resulting in a countrywide lockdown that has gradually been adjusted by the government of Rwanda in the following months. Now, the combined efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID definitely disrupted the ability of many households to access food and healthcare services. And as Guardians for Health, we've been really stepping in to bridge the gap by providing support to agricultural inputs, providing direct food support, providing support in nutrition and health counseling in partnership with health clinics, and also working with farmers to make sure that they keep afloat in so many ways. Now, that being said, to the first question, definitely the impact of COVID have been significant. And what I think has also been evident is that this crisis exposed further most of the challenges that we were having before in the food system. Those include, but not limited to, the lack of access to inputs, climate change, pests and diseases. On the consumer side, we saw diminishing diets quality, primarily through declining demand for vegetables, fruits, and animal source foods, which are the main source of essential micronutrients in the diet. It has also, as highlighted by some other panels before me, it has also amplified existing inequalities, and some of the notable ones, access to nutritious food and access to healthcare. Also the disruption of the local food supply and global chains, the loss of income has definitely affected the ultra poor, contributing to their inability to access dietary quality. In thinking about really all these challenges, a few suggestions that we've been trying to work towards as an organization that I would like to pass along. One is that as Guardians for Health, we believe that food alone doesn't equal to nutrition, and that access to nutritious food should never be a luxury or commodity. So I do think that in the same light of looking at food, access to nutritious food as a human right, as a universal, as a universal attribute, it is important to have this as an integral part of any solutions that are being thought through at different levels, whether it's a policy level, whether it's at the innovation level. Secondly, we have also seen that food poverty and food waste systems affects the most disadvantaged, because they have limited choice, they have limited opportunities, and most of the time proposed solutions aren't always tailored to their context. And I think that it's very important that as we think about how to change the course, that these people should be the guiding star, their circumstances should be the guiding star for us to come across with interventions that are relevant, but also effective. There's also need to build a resilient, integrated, and values-based food system. And I use the word values intentionally because it's through values that we're able to take or even recognize and appreciate what is in the best interest of all the players, particularly the local smallholder farmers or producers who really make the food system engine to run. Now, a question was also asked about the how can the partnership between the global and multilateral and multilateralism really help to address crises like this in the future. I think one of the key questions that we faced was we know there are things that we know very true. We know our immediate communities. We know their experience. There is a wealth of experience that we have all picked along the journey. But when global and local food supply systems are disrupted, like we saw, how do we empower households? How do we empower families to grow their own nutritious food? So I think this really, it is important that as we think ahead, it is important to build resilience in our food systems to withstand future shocks, and not only just to bounce back, as the first speaker set the stage, but also to ensure that there is a fair and just recovery as the impacts of such crises are not felt equally across the board. Lastly, just to quickly share some of the avenues of our contribution, things that we are doing, which we believe should also cut across. One, we've been working to support enhanced homestead food production to increase access to nutrient-rich vegetables. So we are providing farmers like Eliminata with seeds, quality seeds. We're also providing them with information to inform their decision when it comes to their consumption patterns. Secondly, we have been advocating, and we think it's very important to work towards really shifting from the prevailing narrative of food systems that merely feeds people to systems that nourishes people. Thirdly, it is
very interesting talk. I know that. Could you please summarize for the benefit?
Yes, only 2 points to go. Lastly, I think as highlighted, it's important to really increase meaningful engagement of women in agriculture. And finally, as we think of innovation, it's important to think of low-cost, local farming solutions that help small farmers increase yield and productivity of produce. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I thank you for this opportunity to be part of this conversation.
Very interesting, and I appreciate so much your video. It is a very, very insightful and interesting innovation. Please keep up good work and share more such video with us also. Thank you. It's very learning. Now I would like to again go back to our Mustafa Hamid Jia for a very short conclusion now. If your internet is not good, maybe you can just speak audio without video. Maybe that will sustain our internet connection.
Sure, Mr. Ghulam. Sorry for the inconvenience caused by the unstable connection. I will just go through the some points, the things that our colleague from Pakistan, Mr. Muhammad Sagar, and also other colleagues mentioned. We have similar activities as well here. So as we said in the beginning, that every activity in the agriculture and livestock sector helps in nutrition and climate resilience activities. So our interventions are on farm management, on farm water management on 2 levels, channeling irrigation water from the main source, and also efficient use of water. When we say efficient use of water, it means an irrigation scheme we build or activity we are doing, on average, we are bringing around 20% of new arable lands, which helps in more productivity of agriculture, which eventually helps in food security, and the surplus will be sold by the farmers to the market, and also will help in increase income in the rural areas. Other activities are agriculture extension activities, which includes distribution of improved variety of seeds of different crops, capacity building of farmers, introduction of new technologies, new agricultural technologies to increase production and productivity. Now, while we are doing land leveling, by that efficient use of water is managed, and also the new methods of cultivation is introduced to the farmers, which eventually helps in agricultural productivity. On the other activities such as livestock development activities, it also includes animal husbandry related services, livestock extension, animal health and breed improvement services, also providing the livestock owners with fodder crops, resources, development, and their access to market. This intervention has increased milk production thrice the baseline that we started, and which contributes to household food security and nutrition, as well as income generation for the household, particularly women-headed households. These are, we have different activities such as establishment of milk collection center at different villages where the livestock owners can have access to the market as well. During the COVID-19 pandemic, since there were closure of the borders as well as inner cities, provinces movement was blocked, we had a decrease in supply of milk to the processing centers. But then we introduced new activities such as diversifying the dairy products, such as training the livestock owners how to prepare cheese, how to prepare we call yogurt balls that can be used, which helps in the products to last longer and also helps in nutrition security. The project also assisted poor and rural women-headed households with provision of poultry packages that are directly contributing to the household nutrition and food security. There are other activities and interventions as well, such as kitchen gardening and school gardening for the purpose of food security and nutrition. And also our analysis shows that around the income of the woman-headed household through this intervention, where we provide poultry packages, will increase up to 25,000 AFS, which is around $500. And during winter season in rural areas, there are shortage of vegetables and fruits, and the project trained and equipped farmers and also especially women-headed households on how to process products in the peak season and to use them when there is a shortage. All these activities contribute to the...
Yeah, sorry to intervene. I think if you can summarize, because this is all
sure, I will conclude it now. I will conclude it, and also I will conclude this by saying that we have some lessons learned from the first wave of COVID-19. The government already took some actions which are assisting rural farmers by provision of inputs and storages to store their harvested crops, and also government initiated a strict monitoring of market prices for primary needed items. In addition to that, the government also purchased around more than 100,000 metric tons of wheat to keep the strategic reserve
I think we lost again.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we lost again. Okay, I think he made his point. I think he made his point. I think we got the point. Yeah.
Thank you for giving me another chance to explain myself. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. And particularly if you see that in Afghanistan, it is the case of the case of the suffering from the both climate change extremely and what you are doing to address the climate change, as well as the most victim and sufferer because of COVID. Because of COVID, it is of course economic food production, and because Afghanistan suffered more because of its landlockness, because its food import is huge, and during the COVID, food supply was disrupted. It is not affected food, but also Afghanistan has to pay a lot of damage for that. Their food stuff was stuck in some other countries, and a lot of money has to spend for damage for their port authority for their food truck damage. So it is a huge case. In Afghanistan, we wish that we will have more resilient capacity for Afghanistan food, nutrition, poverty alleviation, and child nutrition and food insecurity is extremely very high in Afghanistan. So thanks for your good work. Hope it will help. And with this, probably we have finished all the presentation now. Now we have some question coming through the chat box. Maybe I can request some of the question targeted toward the particular.
There's no particular question towards the panelists, but they were discussing about it's a good time to think about restoration in order to build back better. I think ecosystem restoration had been
some discussion going. I said question answer section. One was discussing then particularly the Ken Mohammed share a bit more on the project intervention, enterprise development. I think he has covered this. But another question targeted toward basically on, I think this is very much relevant to Jared, because somebody is raising that how about the benefit of COVID on coral reef and endangered species on the sea. I think this is the this was some discussion I see. So if Jared, if you want to respond this, so you may.
That's a discussion within the boxes, not a presentation.
Oh, this is the question.
I think we're pretty good in covering all the comments, but there were emphasizes on breaking the kind of persistent gender discrimination or somehow. But I think that's we keep that in mind.
Okay. So should I give 2-3 minutes to just wrap up for the panelists? One minute by everybody, if they want to say anything more. Or time is over already. What should you do? Panelists, are you interested?
If I may come in, I think I'm afraid we're past our time, but I have to say I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank Drs. Golam or Drs. Rasul and Sang for Ling Xu and Golam for an excellent facilitation. I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Dr.
Swinnen.
Yes, and all of the panelists. What I can see that you have so very ably highlighted is that the issues that we are tackling are and that we know are multifaceted. It depends on which angle we come from, and we have also highlighted that during these discussions. If we said, you know, whether you look at it from a more of an environmental perspective, more of a human development perspective, more of a agrobiodiversity perspective. So all of these will now somehow, and I think this you have done extremely well, because even though we are dealing with a vast problem, we already see some issues that are very much common, irrespective of which angle we tackle the problem from. And that of course is, you know, access to nutritious food to be, you know, a top priority as we move forward. But it is also about the empowerment of communities and how South-South and regional cooperation can come in and empower these communities. I think we have heard a lot, and as Ling Xu also noted, we have heard a lot about the role of women and the crucial point of empowering women in the field of access to nutritious food. And I think we've seen really excellent examples of this. What I think we will, it provides very good basis for our discussions tomorrow. We will pick this up. We will have a short debrief of our discussions here today at the start of tomorrow's sessions, and we will dig down further into these conversations. I hope you will all return tomorrow for our continued discussions. And if not, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today and yes, providing us with such insights and an extremely good basis to take this work one step forward. Thank you very much. Ling Xu, would you want to come in?
You've said what I wanted to say, but I wanted to get a logistic down. Are we allowed to share the PPTs of those? Can Can this be?
We could ask, I wonder whether we can ask it this way. If anyone is completely opposed to us, sharing their PowerPoint presentations, please raise your hand or open your microphone. If we do not hear from you, we would really appreciate it if we could share them on our website, because this is it's a lot of extremely important material and information.
I have no more.
We are fine.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you.
We run over time, but I think that's usually the case when we have lots of things to discuss.
Yes, and lots of important things to discuss. So no, thank you to all. We will reconvene tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, all the panelists.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rasul, and all other colleagues. Have a good time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to listen from Pakistan, Afghanistan, basically.
We are happy to discuss all the activities, interventions of our project.
Yes, yes. Maybe sometime we organize some event at EC mode. We can share more.
Sure. We'll be happy to contribute. Thank you very much, Mr. Ghulam. Have a good
day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, everybody.